This is VOCM Open Line. Call 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626. The views and opinions of this program are not necessarily those of this station. The biggest conversation in Newfoundland and Labrador starts now. Here's VOCM Open Line host Paddy Daly.
Well, all right, and good morning to you. Thank you so much for tuning into the program. It's Friday, March the 1st. This is Open Line. I'm your host, Paddy Daly. David Williams. He's producing the Come On With It edition of the program. So if you're in the St. John's metro region, the number to dial to get in the queue and on the air, 709-273-5211. Elsewhere, it's toll-free long distance, 1-888-590-VOCM, which is 8626. So maybe see you down at Mary Brown Centre over the weekend where the Growlers host the Kalamazoo Wings. And of course, on Saturday night's game, so they play Friday, Saturday, Sunday. On Saturday night's game, it is indeed the Kids Eat Smart night in cooperation with the Hebron Company and with the Growlers. $5 for every ticket that night will go directly towards Kids Eat Smart for the programs that they execute around the province. So there's an opportunity for you. Stick with the ice. Young Newhook scores his 9th on the season last night. He played a really good game, as was also remarked by Brian Medore. We both watched the game, and that boy can skate. And sticking with the ice, just for one interesting note, it was on this date in 1997, and I remember this happening. Canadian figure skater Elvis Stojko hit the first ever quad triple combination jump in the history of figure skating competition. He won that event that time in Hamilton, Ontario. It was the Championship Series final, the first ever quad triple landed. And fingers crossed for a bit of weather, cool temperatures, maybe a dump of snow for the folks out at Marble and White Hills. We all saw the pictures where the mountain was basically rushing towards the chalet. Now, they've got some man-made snow that seems to have stuck around. They say they'll be open in some capacity this weekend, but been a tough run for the folks, skiers and snowboarders in particular. Okay. So yesterday we were told of the passing of Canada's 18th Prime Minister, the boy from Baie-Comeau, the Right Honourable Brian Mulroney. You're going to hear a lot of the similar words talking about legacy. He was a transformative Prime Minister, a statesman, all of which are true. And as a Prime Minister, he took some really big swings and some really big issues, and you'll hear plenty of praise coming in for him and our condolences to his family, friends and colleagues. And yes, he had an incredible run as Prime Minister, but of course, with any politician, it comes with the good and the bad. I have no interest in talking ill of the dead, as they say, but if we try to have an honest reflection on Mr. Mulroney, we'll certainly be welcoming your calls today. So regarding his involvement in this part, well, actually, let's start in 1984. So in 1984, he swept to power, won an unprecedented record of 211 seats out of 282 in the election which happened on September the 4th of 1984. And of course, in large part, that was due to kicking down the door in Quebec, where the PCs won 58 out of 75 ridings. And we know, though, 282 seats in 1984 now ballooned to 338 seats inside of Parliament. So let's get to it. And of course, the last progressive Conservative Prime Minister. Now, yes, Kim Campbell did serve a handful of months as a PC Prime Minister as well. And on the heels of the devastating loss, because when he swept to power in 84, he was wildly popular amongst Canadians. On the way out of 93, not so much. And then the result was what is basically was a civil war inside the Progressive Conservative Party, and came out the other side with what we see today as being the Conservative Party on the federal front. So where do you even start here? So the debate with John Turner in 1983 was really one of those marquee moments that put him over the top. You know, he's pointing basically at Turner, repeatedly saying or implying that you simply cannot be trusted. And that was basically about a lot of the patronage appointments that had taken place under Liberal governments. And of course, upon being elected, Mr. Mulroney, then Prime Minister Mulroney, did pretty much the same thing with a handful of senators and the like. So, you know, you take the good with the bad, and we just, again, an honest reflection of his life and times as the Prime Minister. So in the world of big swings, you know, as it pertains to this province, of course, most notably is the Atlantic Accord. He was in the room that day and signed the Atlantic Accord alongside then Premier Brian Peckford, and of course the praise that he would heap on John Crosbie about his involvement not only in the Atlantic Accord but his leadership at the cabinet table. So my mind is racing here today about where to go with this particular life and times and legacy of the late Prime Minister Brian Mulroney. But, in relation to Quebec, he really did gain some national prominence when he was appointed to be part of the Cliche Commission, which was looking at scandals inside the construction industry inside that province. He was a very prominent attorney in his day. He was a senior partner at a very tender age. And yes, being launched from the Cliche Commission to life and times on the federal scene is absolutely part of his story. But then you look at some of the massive issues he was involved with. The Atlantic Accord is the big one here in this province. And of course, notably, the Atlantic Accord now being reevaluated and amended to potentially allow for offshore wind. Then you talk about the relations that he was running on in 1984 as well, talking about relationships with the United States. And a lot of work was done there. So whether it be with President Reagan and the Acid Rain Accord, and or, of course, notably, NAFTA. NAFTA was lauded. Now, there was no real mention of the NAFTA agreement during that campaign leading up to the sweeping victory in 1984. But it was already in the works. And then, of course, there was some back and forth between Mulroney and Crosby as to whether or not that type of free trade agreement was the appropriate path forward when we talk about economic upside. But it did come to pass under Brian Mulroney. Now, there's long still since been debate about this type of free trade. Now, I think it's made things less costly for consumers, but you just look at some of the issues regarding job creation. 13 years after the implementation of NAFTA, the country had created about half the jobs it did in the 13 years prior. So that's where I think some of the debate remains in place. Speaking of the Atlantic Accord, of course, not only led to a burgeoning oil industry off our shores, notably starting with Hibernia, but even when COVID struck, Brian Mulroney came back to the aid of this province, calling on the federal government to ensure that whatever had to be done to keep the business alive without going by the wayside had to come to pass. And in large part, he was successful. Now, that $384 million pot of money that went directly to the companies, not to the employees, I suppose was a result of some of his efforts. Okay, moving down the line. The praise that he gave to John Crosby is absolutely notable, but also during his career, when we talk about some of the other big figures that were involved with Mulroney, is Lucien Bouchard. Bouchard was his lieutenant in Quebec. He was the Minister of Environment in the Brian Mulroney cabinet. And I think when Mr. Mulroney was asked about, you could see the, I'll call it, devastation or sadness in his eyes. Because Bouchard then, as people know, defected from the Mulroney Progressive Conservative Party and started the Parti Québécois. So that was one of those moving parts that I don't think gets a whole lot of attention. But let's just, run down, without getting too deep into the weeds, some of the big swings that Mr. Mulroney was involved in. And of course, for Canadians, the implementation of GST was a big part of Brian Mulroney's tenure as the Prime Minister. And think of some other things. Meech-Lake Accord, which really was a problem for the province of Quebec, and we'll talk about the fact that Clyde Wells in this province were a big reason why it went by the wayside. I think you do have to add, I can't remember his name, I think Elijah Hawkins, who was a Manitoba Member of Parliament. That was really part of knocking that off the rails. And then the Charlottetown Accord to bring Quebecers back into the fold, which, of course, led to something that his political hero, John Diefenbaker, was unable to do, is to win a second majority government and then move down the line. So he privatized Petro-Canada, right? And the Charlottetown Accord was a big deal. He was intimately involved on the global stage with sanctions against South Africa involving apartheid. And I mentioned the Acid Rain Treaty. He was also at the helm during the Gulf War, the Oka crisis, where the military were brought in to deal with the protesters. Then the creation of the Emergencies Act, which has now for the first time been invoked by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau regarding the protest in the city of Ottawa. He was intimately involved in the Environmental Protection Act. He did privatize Air Canada. And the Nunavut land claims was dealt with during Prime Minister Mulroney's tenure. And then, again, not in any type of effort to speak ill of the dead, but this issue dogged him for years after. And this was the Airbus issue, the Airbus scandal. So he did indeed win an out-of-court settlement in 1997 in a libel suit against the RCMP and, of course, settled by the then Liberal government. And the notable figure in the side of that affair was German businessman Karl-Heinz Schreiber. Schreiber, upon waiting for extradition back to Germany to serve prison time for tax evasion, he started to drop a bunch of hints that Mulroney was absolutely involved in the Airbus scandal. He never said that quiet part out loud, but it dogged Prime Minister Mulroney for years after. In 2008, he got a real public grilling about it once again, even after the out-of-court settlement was arrived at in 1997. So yes, transformative, no question. Absolutely a statesman. And people will debate whether or not the best prime minister since Laurier. There'll be plenty of comments coming in about the creation of neoliberalism that has been a result of some of the policies that were executed by the then PC government. And yes, it led to some significant infighting that what we see is today's Conservative Party, which certainly is vastly different than the then Progressive Conservative Party on the National Front. So any thoughts you want to add to it, whether it be specifically about his relationship with this province and or some of the big national files, whether it be from GST to NAFTA to Petro-Canada to Air Canada, there's a lot to it. Of course, there always will be when you serve as Prime Minister for 2 terms. But you just think about the ups and the downs. When swept into power in 1984, one of the most popular political figures in the world, one of the most popular political figures in this country, and we hadn't seen numbers like that in quite a long time. And then, just all those years later, in 93, they were decimated. So if you want to talk about it, we can do it. Of course we can. What else did I see here in my scribbles? Okay. So, as mentioned yesterday, sworn in to be a member of the Fury cabinet was Fred Hutton. Fred is now the Minister of Housing. I think if you stand back, it's really quite interesting when we think about housing and how it's dealt with politically and even in public discourse. It's just recently that the federal government created a ministerial portfolio for housing, and it's Sean Fraser, who was formerly the Minister of Immigration. And now we've splintered out housing out from the Department of Children, Seniors and Development, which is Paul Pike's department. And so it's a standalone ministerial portfolio. Of course, there's always that concept of you need to learn the ropes. You need to be able to have the discussions with the groups that are working actively on the ground, and there are the senior bureaucrats that will be created. There isn't a formal mandate letter in place as of yet. But the unfortunate reality for Mr. Hutton, who has indeed been thrown in the deep end with a critically important file, is there's not really time. You know, we still have people living in tents. We still don't have any real new understanding of oversight at emergency shelters. We're still not sure what the implication of Crown lands will mean for building the homes that we need to build. We still don't know if there's going to be clear amendments made at municipal levels with guidance from the department itself and from Fred Hutton about timings for permitting and what have you. So I know it takes a bit of time to be fully up to speed. But he was the senior policy advisor for the Premier for a long time. And so you would imagine, and I think it would absolutely be the case, that he'd be familiar enough with the file to hopefully hit the ground running. But we can take that on if you're so inclined. And I was kind of bleary-eyed when I opened my eyes this morning, started scrolling through the news to see a picture of a Cougar helicopter and mention of a crash. And it did indeed happen off the coast of Norway, where there's one Equinor employee that has been killed. It was simply on a training mission. Cougar flights have now been grounded here in this province. And of course, it's the same aircraft, the Sikorsky S-92 that was being used off of Norway. And of course, those are the machines used to shuttle people to and fro the offshore platforms. So the Cougar flights are down. This one on a little lighter note regarding travel, and this crosses my mind every now and then. It's about when you travel on a commercial airline and your checked bag fee versus the fact you can take a carry-on for free. So back in 2014, Porter, WestJet, Air Canada introduced a $25 a bag checked bag fee for their cheaper fares. Now that fee has jumped some 40%. Just this week, Air Canada and WestJet both increased their checked bag fee by $5. Of course, it's easy money for them, right? If people need to check a bag, then they're going to have to pay the fee. But what it's led to is, of course, people bringing on the maximum size carry-on and multiple carry-ons. It's bad for the airlines as much as it is for the passengers. I've seen some pretty heated exchanges about people trying to find storage for their case in an overhead bin. But it leads to all types of delays. You know, how often do you hear the flight is sold out, the flight is full, would you care to check your bag for free? And of course, it takes forever to do it. And then the confusion with trying to find a bit of overhead space, even for loading the plane, and more notably, for deplaning. It's been a problem. So you know what's going to happen? I'll just guess. I don't know this for sure. They're going to start charging for carry-ons too. They are. And maybe it'll be a fee that might lead people to say, well, as opposed to go through the confusion in the fuselage, I'm simply going to check my bag when I arrive at the airport. So check bag fees are up, and I would imagine carry-on bag fees are not that far behind. So, yeah, up to $42 for a checked bag, which is a pretty extraordinary amount of money. All right, a couple of quick ones before we get to you. So the travel nurses. Okay. So people have heard the stories about the millions of dollars and what that means for the workplace environment. And there's, yes, the hope to reduce reliance on travel nurses, but a story coming from Corner Brook. 6 travel nurses were pulled off the unit, and consequently, that left the public service registered nurses or nurse practitioners to work a 21-hour shift, which was not scheduled. So it's the who knew what when. And it's one thing to reduce our reliance on a travel nurse, but there's got to be a process that's understood by the union, their members, the supervisors that are on the floor or on the unit. Because if we didn't know what's going to happen, and nurses all of a sudden were going to be mandated a 21-hour shift, what we're talking about is chaos. On top of that, we have focused keenly in on the money, and understandably so. But there's no way, and the documentation and the research is out there. After a 12-hour shift, you are really unable to be at your level best. So we're talking about the potential for injury, and probably, I'll just say importantly, is patient safety. The opportunity to make mistakes. How can you possibly be able to offer the level of patient care that you want to as a dedicated healthcare professional when you're physically, emotionally, and mentally exhausted inside of just the course of one shift? So we haven't factored in patient safety as much as we need to on this particular front, I don't think. All right, how are we doing on the phones there this morning, David? I haven't been looking. A couple of quickies. So the investigation into the Come By Chance fire, where there was 7 injured and 1 dead, apparently there's now a claim of solicitor-client privilege that has kept the RCMP for examining the some 63 items that they seized when they executed warrants at Come By Chance, now Brea Fuels. So yes, the recent story has been that Brea is now producing renewable diesel. But we've got to understand exactly what's going on here. There's no timeline for when this is going to be evaluated by the courts as to whether or not the RCMP are going to be able to proceed. They have filed an affidavit to keep these seized items for further investigation close to them and protected, so when and if this is decided, it can move on. So let's hope that the investigation can be fulsome and this particular issue is resolved. Probably the last one. This story is really something else. Based on a CSIS report, the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, talking about the scientists that were fired from Canada's top infectious disease laboratory, of course, that's in Winnipeg. It's the Level 4 virology facility at the National Microbiology Lab. They're dealing with the most serious, deadly human and animal diseases. So the 2 doctors that, I don't know, probably can't pronounce their names properly, Dr. Hui and husband Kitty Cheng. So after the investigation and the interviews conducted with and the repeated lies being told by the scientists, CSIS is now saying that there's absolutely all the evidence required that when they were marched out of the facility in July of 2019 is because they were sharing vital information with China in the interests of the PRC and against Canadian interests. So I think you can probably call them spies. As a, part of the quotes, as a base to assist China to remove its capability to fight highly pathogenic pathogens, and they've achieved brilliant results. Sharing the Ebola genetic sequence with the country, these programs are set up to boost China's national technology capabilities and pose a serious threat to research institutions, including government research facilities, by incentivizing economic espionage and the theft of intellectual property. Goes on to say, in early January 2021, there was a close and clandestine relationship with a variety of entities of the PRC, which is known as a security threat to Canada. Going on to say that they transferred scientific knowledge and materials to China to benefit the PRC without regard for the implications to our employer and or to Canadian interest. So the story has long been bandied about, and of course all the rumors and rumbles have been about why, who, when, where the information was shared. But now, when they were taken out of that facility in July 2019, is because they were spying. And then, you know, the Federal Minister of Health, Mark Holland, a little bit complacent on this one, I think. He says, well, there was a lack of adherence. He calls it unacceptable. It's more than that. It's a national security failure, which can lead us into conversations about foreign interference, because we already think about that as it pertains to elections, but it pertains to things like the microbiology lab. It pertains to things like the business community. You know, all of those have to be factored in. These bad actors, China, Russia, Iran, and others, you know, we haven't had much conversation about the inquiry into foreign election interference, but that story about Winnipeg's virology lab is earth-shattering. We're on Twitter. Not so much. We're VOCM Open Line. Follow us there. Email address is openline@vocm.com. When we come back, let's have a great show. Jolene's going to kick us off talking about what I think she's talking about is a high school in paradise. Don't go away. Welcome back. A couple of things. Brian Callahan has told me now that Cougar flights have resumed. Thank you, Brian, for that updated information. And I mentioned during the Meech Lake Accord discussions that it was a gentleman from Manitoba that was also intimately involved in derailing those talks, in addition to Clyde Wells and others. I said Elijah Hawkins, but his name is Elijah Harper. Big thanks to Ashley for setting me straight on that one. Okay, let's keep rolling. Let's go to line number 2. Jolene, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How are you?
Doing okay, thanks. How about you?
Good, thank you.
Great.
Calling in, you have from your preamble, I hear you have quite a lot of hot topics today, but we don't want people to forget about our advocacy for a high school in Paradise. And we want to put the call out there to all parents and other interested people in Paradise, Mount Pearl, CBS, to say that this Monday we will be sitting in again in the gallery of the House of Assembly, and we're asking for people to come join us. It's good just to make a visible, friendly presence before Budget Day. We certainly don't want anyone to forget about us, and we want all the support we can gather.
Well, it's obviously an important topic for families living in Paradise. And I think it got heightened focus again during the recent by-election in Conception Bay, East Bell Island. It was part of the agenda. So I think that, I don't think it's been forgotten about. In fact, I think with the heaping pressure on newly elected Minister Fred Hutton, and his portfolio may indeed be housing, but he spoke quite clearly about the need for a high school in Paradise. So I won't be surprised in the upcoming budget if there's some focus given to it. Now, I can't get out in front of it. I'm not involved in budget consultations, but I think you're obviously all doing the right thing. For me, and I've heard from many of the members of your group saying this is not about begrudging Portugal Cove St. Philip's a high school.
Not at all.
It's about the statistical need and where Paradise was on the priority list. And unbeknownst to anybody, it came out of left field that Paradise was not getting the school, even though we were told for years that it was the community that was next in line for high school, and didn't make a decision based on data, made a decision based on something else.
No, exactly. And we can get into all the politics about it.
Sure.
And like you said, this is not to take anything away from Portugal Cove St. Philip's, but it was announced in the 2015 budget that we would get a high school. And now, I guess, newly appointed Minister Hutton supported us from the time that he started running. And Minister Studley has supported us. We've met with Minister Howell. Paul Dinn has been advocating for this, I think, since he moved to Paradise. So we're trying not to make it, a party thing or a politics thing. It's really about the need for children, and we need support, and we need to be present, and we need to make sure that they know we're not going away.
How are you going to be recognized in the gallery as being there for this particular purpose?
We're asking people to wear blue.
Okay.
To show that and there'll be others there from our group wearing blue. And if you plan to attend, please bring a photo ID and know that this is not a protest. We're going to sit quietly and just have our presence. But we'll certainly be there if anyone has any questions, comments, concerns that they want to raise with our group as well.
I appreciate you making time, Jolene. Do you have children that are in school now or anyone in high school at this moment? Because, of course, if you're a high schooler today, you're not going to be able to enjoy a newly built school anyway. No,
exactly. Unless there's things in the school that can invite, community participation. But, yes, I have 3 children. I have one at Octagon Pond in grade 3, and I have 2 in grade 6 at Paradise Intermediate. So, I would love for them to have an ability to attend high school in our community, to participate in activities in our community, to support our community. There's so much that we need here, and in a growing town like Paradise, and a high school is certainly one of them.
Yeah, and I hear people say, well, for the folks in Paradise, the bus ride is not like out in rural parts of the province. It's a short ride and what have you, but it can be a 40-minute spin. Also, even if it is a shorter bus ride, it does compromise your your want or ability to participate in extracurriculars and after-school activities. So it's more than simply the amount of time you spend on the bus. So with 2 in grade 6, do I assume that they're twins?
They are, yes.
What are their names?
Just turned 12. Sadie and Jane.
Terrific. And what's the youngest child's name?
Hillary.
Jolene, give the folks the details of what you're planning on doing one more time before we say goodbye.
Sure. So on Monday, March 4th, we'll be meeting at 1:15 at the front entrance of the Confederation Building to sit in the gallery and just to wear blue if possible and bring a photo ID just so that we can show that, we're still here, we're still advocating, and we have the support of our community.
We appreciate your time this morning, Jolene. You're always welcome.
Thank you very much, Patty.
You're welcome. Take care.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye. Yeah, that story's not going away, that's for sure. And nor should it. Let's go to line number 1. Tolson Rendell, you're on the air. Hi, Tolson.
Good morning, Paddy. How are you this morning?
Top shelf. How about you?
Oh, same here, boy. I'm doing pretty good, yeah.
Good.
Blustery old morning out in Harscontent this morning here, boy, with the wind right in on the community here, and it's pretty blustery, I tell you.
Yeah, it looks about the same here.
Snow,
Okay.
But I want to call you, Paddy, this morning, boy. It's a pretty touching day in the town today with the situation with our town clerk celebrating or slash manager celebrating 56 years. She's been there since the start of the local service district right up to now.
Terrific. That's a pretty long run.
Oh, my goodness, yeah. Well, I got a feeling, Paddy, she could be one of the longest-running managers or clerk slash manager probably in the province of Newfoundland and Labrador.
Did you say 56?
56.
And what's her name again?
Alice Cumby.
Alice Cumby. Amazing.
And Paddy, she's not only involved as our town clerk, but she's involved in everything in the community. And I'll go so far to say, even to when we have a clean-up day, she's out picking up garbage. And she's a justice of peace. She's involved in the church. She's involved in all societies. I don't know. I can't say enough about her. She's involved, a totally honourable person in our town to be involved in such and dedicated to such of a community as she is.
Well, I mean, 56 years is a long time to be involved in anything. But as a town manager, which, people sometimes we focus in on the elected councillors and the mayor and what have you, but some of the grunt work and to keep it all together, a lot of that happens in the clerk's office or the town manager's office.
That's right, Paddy. But if you look at the situation with the town of Harscontent, we were incorporated in 1974. As our first election was held as for our mayor and deputy mayor and councillors. And we've had Mayor Don Blunden, Mayor Frank Rowe, first, and then Mayor Don Blunden and Mayor Fred Cumby, and we're only on our fourth mayor in 56 years. There's towns in the province of Newfoundland and Labrador, it's probably been on their fourth mayor in 10 or 12 years. I'm not exactly sure of that, but I'm just saying. We've had a big accomplishment here in this town with a lot of different things going on, and now that we're into the strive, as you know, for UNESCO, it's a big thing, it's a big thrive, and it's been a big thing since 2016, which was our 150th anniversary.
I think it's great. So congratulations to Alice Cumby. That's a great run. And, of course, I'm sure she's pleased with the bouquet coming from you this morning. Anything else, Tolson?
Just to say, Paddy Boy, thanks for everything over the years. And I'm going to throw you out an offer now for you and your wife if you get a chance over the summertime.
Sure.
I'm retired, as you know, and I operate a little farm and that. And I got lots of time. So if you ever get a chance to come to Harscontent, I'll take you on a tour of the whole town, do the cable station, and I'll take you to Legs for lunch.
You're all right by me, Tolson. I'll take you up on it.
Okay, I appreciate it if you would.
Thanks,
Anytime,
buddy.
give me a call and I'll do it.
I appreciate the call this morning and the invite. Stay in touch, Tolson.
Stay safe.
Okay, buddy, you too.
Bye now.
All right, bye-bye. Let's take a break right on time. When we come back, there's a caller that wants to talk about a disturbance on Change Islands, to talk about little Crown lands, whatever you want to talk about. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 2. Caller, you're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy. How are you?
Doing okay this morning. How about you?
Not bad. Beautiful morning.
Yeah, it's pretty nice here in town. The wind's whipping some of that light snow around, but overall pretty good.
Yes, sir. I'm calling. We got a group of protesters. They're going to the ferry and interrupting the service peacefully and legally, and fighting for some trips that we had taken away from us. And there, 2 or 3 days ago, they were carrying out a protest, and they had a resident from Openline came down to the ramp, and he got pretty verbal and talking pretty nasty, and then he pushed one of the protesters, and he told another guy that he was seeing on the other side. He was calling out to change owners, wanting them to come down and take him on. Name calling. He even said that he'd burn us all if he had gas. And he also said that he could tie his arm and his leg behind his back and still beat our GD heads off. What I want to know, is there any kind of a regulation in place? So, like, say, somebody, I'll say employee aboard the boat. Is it anybody's place to report that kind of stuff, and so that it won't happen again, or?
Well, it wouldn't be with someone working for the department. I would imagine the proper place for this next call to be is to the police.
Yes. So who should be dealing with that?
I guess the RCMP on Fogo?
No, I mean like the incident at hand. I mean when it was happening, or.
Well, you know, having not been there at the time, I'm not really sure, but I would think, given what you said about threats of violence and an actual physical shove, and, you know, if I had gas, I'd let you on fire, that kind of stuff. I think if I was in amongst the protests and that was happening, that's exactly when I would call the RCMP at the time. But I'd put it on the radar, even though that issue is now over for now, I'd still put it on the RCMP's radar.
Well, I mean, you know, we're using that theory, just the same as what the Fogo people are, and in a lot of cases, we're actually using the ferry to go to Fogo to do our business over there. We go, we're going back and forth to the hospital, and a lot of us spend a lot of money, thousands of dollars every year at the drugstore, hardware store, and the shipyard. So, I mean, it's a regular thing for us, and then to get met with a person that being pretty nasty and pretty verbal. I mean, I don't know, and you can't seem to get over to anybody. I mean, I tried to get over to the manager of the transportation, and that's not going to happen. Apparently, I got messages and whatever, but you go. I don't see the protest being over because there hasn't been any movement on it. So, you're thinking, can you go again? You don't know what you're going to be met with.
Sure. So is the root of his problem with the protests that you're slowing down the loading and offloading, or what exactly is he crooked about?
Oh, he was blown out with the situation about missing appointments and all that stuff, But I mean, what he don't realize and understand, that is some of our whole purpose of doing what's being done. I mean, we got all kinds of appointments and everything too, and places that we got to get to for the next day, and it is 2 bad trips to lose. Like in the 2 o'clock in the day is an excellent return trip, and a good going away trip to go somewhere to get straight away for whatever your business is the next day, at an hospital or treatments or whatever. So I mean, he's only nasty over the same stuff that we're fighting for, and there was no plans on holding up the boat for any amount of time. They just wanted to peacefully protest that issue and move on, right? And I don't think it was very deserving. I just wanted to make mention of it and whatever.
Well, fair enough. I think it kind of sounds to me like you're both on the same team, but for some reason he wanted to fight with his teammates.
Yeah. Well, we've had that issue before. That's nothing new for us over here.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, I appreciate the time, but I would absolutely call the RCMP and tell them that what happened, and maybe advise them of the next time you're going to protest, and whether or not there would be the consideration of some presence, given the fact that you had this one altercation already, and you never know, it might escalate, right? So that's what I would do.
Never know. You just might do that.
Fair enough. And of course, you'll do as you see fit, but I think I would make that call at least.
Right.
I appreciate the time. Keep me in the loop.
Thank you very much, man.
You're welcome, sir. Take care. All right, bye-bye. Let's keep rolling here. Let's go to Bloomfield and say good morning to the owner-operator of Outport Acres. That's Adam Furlong. Good morning, Adam. You're on the air.
Hey, Paddy. How's it going?
Great today. You?
Not too bad.
Great.
Nice day.
It is.
So I wanted to talk more about the Crown Line thing. I'm kind of getting sick of hearing my own voice talking about this, but it keeps going ignored by anyone who can actually make any changes to make it better, so I guess I'll just have to keep talking about it. Have you seen the What We Heard document that was released by the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Agriculture regarding Crown Lands and the consultation they did with the public?
When was that released?
Just before Christmas, I believe. I don't see a date written on it, but
Well, you know what?
For a
Honest to
couple
God,
months.
I have not. But I'll search it out.
I'll send it to you. I'll send you a link there in your email.
Yeah, okay.
So basically, they did 3 different types of consultation with the public. They did an online questionnaire. They did a virtual consultations session, and then they accepted written submissions from the public or any member of anywhere, really. You didn't even have to be in Newfoundland. I think it was like 99% of respondents were in Newfoundland, but they were accepting written submissions for people to bring forward their concerns or complaints or anything like that. So in the beginning part of the document, they outline the changes being considered. So this is what they are thinking about doing. Number 1 is changing the period of consideration for land ownership from 20 continuous years to 10 continuous years. So instead of 56 to 76, it'll go from 66 to 76.
Right.
Number 2 is they want to set a definitive time period for which somebody making claims over Crown land based on adverse possession, a time limit for when they would have to make those claims. So if you go past that time limit, then you don't even have an option anymore to pursue ownership of that land. And then the third one is allowing the Crown to issue a document that does not grant title to a person, but instead declares the Crown claims no interest in that piece of land. So in all 3 consultations they did, the online questionnaire, the virtual consultation, and the written submissions, all 3 of those were disputed in the exact same way by the vast majority of respondents. Number 1, changing the possessory period from 20 years to 10 years is not a solution. In my opinion, it only makes the issue more nonsensical. I mean, we've got, 524 years of occupancy in this island since people came from Europe, and we're going to look at some randomly selected 20-year period as the only thing that matters. If you reduce that down to 10 years, in my opinion, that makes even less sense. We've got 524 years of people living here, and you're only going to consider some random 10-year period for anyone to claim ownership of a piece of land that they lived on for decades or members of their family have lived on for centuries. I mean, if you look at the town of Bonavista, which was the first settled place, so you can say that they've got 524 years of occupancy of land in Bonavista, and you're only going to look at 10 years for the only thing that matters. It just makes no sense whatsoever. Number 2, setting the definitive time frame for which you can make a claim against the Crown. That's obviously a very backwards way of looking at it. I mean, most people who have this issue don't even know that they have the issue. So if your time limit that you set here comes and goes, and people who don't even know that they have this problem never submitted a claim because they didn't know that there was a problem in the first place, now your time limit is gone, and these people are completely out of luck. And then number 3 allows the Crown to issue a document that does not grant title, but instead declares the Crown claims no interest. That already exists. They can already issue a quit claim over a piece of land to say, we don't agree that you own the land, but we have no interest in the land and we don't care what happens to it. So then it's going to default back to the Registry of Deeds. If there's a documentation in the Registry of Deeds that shows that you own the land, the only people objecting to your ownership are the Crown, and they've issued a quit claim, so they don't make any claim over your land, so now you're good. So number 3 is just nonsense. That's already something that exists that they are choosing not to utilize to solve these problems.
You know, some of the suggestions of what can make it easier and more meaningful and, lessen the time and aggravation, the costs associated with legally trying to quiet a title. And, I know you can't just flip the switch and we go back to 1976 and it's squatters' rights and on we go. But, between yourself and Greg French and others who have spoken on this issue, I'm not entirely sure, maybe it's about money, I'm not entirely sure why the government is so resistant to take simple advice on simple solutions that can make it easier, make it better pretty quickly.
Well, I think the government is resistant to it because they don't want to Yeah, the whole thing, the longer that it goes on, it just baffles me. I do not understand why it's gone ignored for so long. Like, we've been through several ministers of that department, and none of them have spoken about it at all. You know, even if they're questioned about it, they have very little to say about the whole issue, and I don't understand why. Like, what are you just satisfied to completely ignore the issue and let it slowly burn as it's been going? Like, I mean, the way that it's been going so far is that it's just slowly and quietly in the background, systematically taking people's land ownership from them. It's not in the public eye. It's one family at a time winding up in court, fighting against the Crown for their land ownership. But the Crown are the ones who wrote the law and the legislation surrounding who owns what land. So, I mean, if you end up in court, the judge can only adjudicate your case based on what's written in the law. And the people who you're fighting against are the ones who wrote the law. So you don't stand a chance. They have the law written in a way currently that says they own it. So if you are going to court with them saying that you own it and you don't have the very specific documentation that they require to show that you own it, then you're going to lose. And you're going to spend tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees and court dues to make your case that you're going to lose, and then you're going to have to spend tens of thousands of dollars to buy your own land back from the Crown. It's, you know, I'm not any kind of a conspiracy theorist and all these kind of people who are always saying, oh, the government are corrupt and they're just filling their own pockets and all that kind of stuff. I don't believe any of that. But based on what's been happening with the Crown Land Division and the Lands Act and private citizens' land ownership, I mean, this whole process is absolutely corrupt. At a minimum, it is morally and ethically corrupt for the people in the government to feel justified to take private citizens in this province to court and knowingly take them to court, know that they are going to spend tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees for something that they're going to lose. And in the process of them losing it, you are going to discredit them from owning property that has been in their family for decades or generations.
And I remember one of the last times we spoke, you did some math based on what the settlement was between the Diamonds from Catalina and the government for their piece of property. And if you extrapolate that across, I can't remember the exact number you used, but we're talking millions of dollars that might come out of our pockets to the government based on land that we've been sitting on for decades or generations, as you mentioned, paying municipal taxes on it for decades or generations, have farmed it for decades or generations, and here we are having to settle these things with the frustration of having to bring a lawyer on side. You know you're going to lose, and you eventually settle some cash sum for the eventual transfer, and it's all so unnecessary. I would like to see Pleeman Forsey table his private members' resolution. Whether it needs to be updated or not, I'm not sure. I can't remember exactly how it was worded. But he'll make references to very specific articles of the Crown Lands Act. Let's get that back on the floor. And as opposed to what the Liberals did last time, was simply rejected out of hand, let's see if we can't encourage them to have a meaningful debate on the House floor to see exactly why the Liberals think the Forsey or the PCs are on the wrong track. But it never got anywhere because they simply didn't decide. They decided not to take it on or entertain it at the time. Final thoughts go to you, Adam. Go ahead.
Yeah, just quickly about the special members resolution. I don't know if you actually watched that. I watched the online video of the debate over that special members resolution, and they did debate it. They were debating it for an hour and a half, maybe more. Every single member, both Liberal and PC, as well as Independents and NDP, they all stood up, and every one of them agreed that there are residents in their constituency who have this problem. They all recognized it as a major issue that needs to be solved. And then when it came down to a vote at the end of it, every single Liberal member in the House voted to not move forward with fixing it.
Yeah, I guess that's where I was going, is that the government voted it down. You know, going back and forth and saying, yes, I have the same problem amongst my constituents is not the same as actually voting it through for next steps. But anyway, fair enough.
Exactly. So one other thing I wanted to say is that I have started a petition on change.org, just calling for the government to make meaningful and fair changes to the Lands Act, because, I mean, the changes that they're proposing are not fair. They're just going to be changes that further benefit themselves rather than the people who live here and own land. So if you just go on Google and search change.org, fix Crown Land or Crown Land NL or anything like that, you'll find the petition. It's also on my personal Facebook, Adam Furlong. You can find it on there. It's on the Facebook and Instagram accounts for my farm business. You can find it on Outport Acres on Facebook or Instagram. If you could go on there, anyone who's interested in reviewing, I've got a little summary of what the issue is and how it has affected the province in general and how it has affected me and my family and my business specifically. If you could just have a skim down through that, and if you can sign it and share it with people that you know, I mean...
Fair enough.
The more attention, the more signatures that we can get on this before the House opens in the spring, hopefully it'll
on Monday.
More front of mind for everybody.
Fair enough, and it opens on Monday. Adam, I'm late for the break, but folks, if you're interested, please do search it out. Stay in touch, Adam.
Perfect. Thanks, Paddy.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. Let's take a break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 4. Say good morning to the Ward 5 councillor here in the city of St. John's. That's Carl Ridgely. Carl, you're on the air.
Hey, Paddy. How you doing?
Doing okay. How about you this morning?
Oh, not too bad. No, not too bad at all.
So you were the focus of a caller yesterday, and there was a lot said, but one was your, the inability to get in touch with you, and I think you referred to as the ghost, and talking about your attendance record at council. What is your attendance record? Because I don't follow it that closely.
Yeah, I find it a little bit. There was a few other points that he made that I'll get to, but Paddy, just what I do with my council phone number, which is in the city guide, is on the website. Anybody can look up my home phone number in the phone book. My 576-2332 number at City Hall actually rings to my cell phone. I got to forward it to my cell phone. So 98% of the people that call me, I actually answer the phone, and quite a few of them I take by surprise, because when they hear a voice answering my phone, they, instead of leaving a message, they're actually talking to me. So I take a little bit of, people, I suppose, they don't know the goings on and what I'm doing. But I am definitely available. And when it comes to my council meetings, listen, we all go on holidays for a couple of weeks a year, 2 or 3 times a year, or twice a year, probably, 2 or 3 weeks. And so far, just in regular council meetings, there's been 321 meetings, and I've been at 300 of them. So again, my numbers are up over 93%. So now listen, I'm not going to say there's not an issue down here with attendance sometimes with councillors and all that, and you're actually discussing it and is public knowledge. But I am in the chamber when meetings are on the go, so I'm always there. I really am.
Okay, and so what other points would you like to pick up on that were made by the caller yesterday? So
the first one. I'm not into repeating what other people are saying. So, Councillor Corab was on your program a while back concerning these water bills, and it was only me and him actually that tried to get this converted or changed from the original decision. But anyway, council, it was council's decision, and when council makes a decision whether you're against it or for it, once it's council decision, you got to support it and move forward. But he referenced that there was thousands of people affected, but it wasn't. It was a little over 700.
700, I think I said. I've always used that number.
Yeah, I know, but I think Robert said it was thousands. But I know there's no doubt. You correct him, but it is only 700, a little over 700. And we don't have. You questioned it and you were concerned or something about assistant city manager, but there is no new appointed assistant city manager. I think what he was referring to was when Deputy City Manager Renan Windsor with Public Works was on talking about snow clearing and everything else. But that's not a new position. That's a position that's been here for forever, as long as I can remember. And I'm here since 21. But even before that, there was always a Public Works manager. So I think there is, just to let everybody know, there is no new assistant city manager, and and that is important because in 2016 the city reviewed their programs and staffing, and there was 80 positions that were terminated or not filled or gone. So we actually reduced our staff in 2016 by 80. Now that has grown a little bit because of demands from the residents about increased snow clearing or whatever. You got to add on to that, but we're still below the 2016 mark. So when it comes to staff and where we're at, we're actually lower today than we were in 2015, 2016. So that's a good thing, and it shows that we're trying to improve our services by still maintaining a healthy staff, and where we're at is good as a city as far as I'm concerned. And another point that he made was the sports manager that we hired. And obviously, I think you referenced that too. And that's Brent Mead with St. John Sports and Entertainment. And Brent is a very accomplished with he got excellent background. And I do believe that the facility is going to improve with economic spin-off. And, another thing that people got to look at when it comes to St. John Sports and Entertainment, and they look at it as a subsidy in the city. Yeah, we were $6 million this year subsidizing that facility. There is economic spin-off, but the city, it is a recreation facility in the city. And, your kids, my kids, they played hockey at Mar 1 at the time. And so, there is adult recreation hockey. There's different things happening in Mar 1. So while, I don't look at it as subsidising solely just professional sports teams, whether it's basketball or hockey. There is and every recreation facility in the city is subsidised to the tune of 80%. This one is not 80%, thanks be to God. But, there is a recreation aspect of St. John Sports and Entertainment that sometimes people seem to forget.
Fair enough. And I mean, as a resident of the city, I need St. John's Sports and Entertainment to turn the corner here. I do know Mr. Mead, and I do think he's a solid choice, and I hope he's able to pull off the vision as he's articulated in the media. Anything else, Carl, before I have to get to the news?
Yeah, just real quick, Paddy. Just yesterday, I think you or Robert brought up about the snow equipment and everything else. And, in this budget of 2024, we done a significant purchase with snow equipment. But, if we got 8 snow blowers in our fleet right now and only 4 are on the road, that's no benefit to you or me or anybody in the cul-de-sac or any side streets around the city because 4 are broke down. So, we are on a cycle now. We're on a 6-year cycle with all our equipment. This is 2024 is the first, so we made a significant purchase this year, looking at doing the same thing in 25, 26, 27, 28, and it's going to be on a 6-year cycle. So what that's going to do is going to put better equipment on the roads, more reliable equipment on the roads, and hopefully in the long run, it's going to save us money with parts and, supplies and getting parts and purchasing parts and fixing stuff. So, I really strongly believe that that's, while it's tough to either a slight increase, or it's not a slight, but it's 12 or 13% increase, on your taxes, which, I'm paying the same thing. It's not like we're exempt from it. But, if our services are improving and that 13%, which I'm hoping they're going to, that's all we can wish for and hope for, and I'm confident they will, then, listen, at the end of the day, people, if they see better services and they're getting value for the dollar, I think the majority of the residents can appreciate that. Yeah,
it's going to be hard to measure whether or not 13% additional taxes is going to be followed by 13% improvement in services. I guess the issue with the amount of equipment turnover is not that we don't need new stuff, that it's actually serviceable and can do the job. Of course, everyone thinks that. Is that, if it's snow clearing, ice management and garbage trucks, I spoke to people in logistics and fleet management, and they think that that's the issue. It's not that you have to replace it, it's that it's all in one fell swoop, which feels different, 13% in 1 year versus, say, 10% over 3 years while we replace on an orderly fashion. I'm glad to hear there's a 6-year plan. I don't know if that's always been the case, but all that replacement of major equipment in 1 year is a problem for taxpayers. I can say that because I'm one of them.
Yeah, and so am I, Paddy. I am. But, the thing is with it, we can't have equipment broke down either. We can't have unreliable equipment on the streets. And, and I don't think that 13% reflects total all of the equipment. We increase snow clearing routes, which residents want. Our recreation programs are growing. So, there's other things that are involved in that 13%. And, to say that, not you now, but for the general public to believe that is all because of snow clearing, that's not factual.
It's the big ticket items. Carl, I'm late for the news. I appreciate your time.
Anyway, thank you, Paddy, and have a good night.
You too. Bye-bye. Bye. Ward 5 Councillor Carl Ridgely. Just before the news, I want to say happy 44th wedding anniversary to Gary and Patty Murphy. That's love from your 5 children and your 6 grandchildren. We hope you have a tremendous day with your friends and your family. So happy 44th to Gary and Patty Murphy. Let's take a break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 3. Say good morning to the NDP member for Live West. That's Jordan Brown. Jordan, you're on a landline. You're on the air.
I'm on the line this time, yeah. I'm going to add it to the list of things and concerns is Bell's quality of service in Lab West. On top of that, but right now I want to talk about the summit from this past week and the how that went and some of the stuff that came out of it. It was a fantastic week. It was good to see that we actually managed to bend the ear of enough ministers to actually fly up and listen to the concerns of Labrador West face to face.
Okay, and as we tried to get through the conversation yesterday, you can talk about healthcare and you can talk about the mining sector or a variety of things, but inside of all of that, I think you have to start at the beginning, which probably is housing. Do you think that's an accurate assessment?
Oh, well, housing is one of the linchpin issues we got. We can't bring healthcare workers if we got nowhere to put them. We can't bring in, other types of workers like teachers and other staff that we don't have in the region. We can't bring them in if we got nowhere to put them. So until we start with housing and work our way out, all the other issues you can't be solved without people moving to Lab West. And that's one of the things that we all established is that we need to get the housing continuum back on track. Make sure there's affordable housing for people. Right now, if you check a real estate site in Lab West, there's a small bungalow, 2-3 bedroom bungalows are going for almost $500,000, which is just absolutely absurd.
Yeah, so, and housing is not just a one thing, right? It could be for people who are so-called working age, working in whatever industry, or we also have to talk about accommodations and affordable housing for seniors and what that looks like, because it might be living on your own, it might be with assisted living, of which there's none available in Lab West. So there's a lot to it. So that's the housing issue, and I think we all really understand exactly what's going on there. But here's an interesting question or a comment coming from Lab City Mayor Belinda Adams. She says, people keep saying we're a mining town. We need to change that mentality. We're not a mining town, but we're a town with a mine. I can't ask you to speak for her, but what do you think of that statement, and what do you think that means?
Well, absolutely. I actually 100% agree with Belinda. I grew up here. My dad's here. My grandfather was here in 1959. I'm third generation, and I'm raising 2 girls here now, and they're the future of Lab West. We've been mining iron ore in Labrador West for 70 years. We've grown past the idea that we are a company town, a mine town. We are a community. We're a vibrant, living, breathing community. Yes, we're surrounded by 2 iron mines, but there's more opportunity here than that. And, with 70 years of history right now in this region, we can get past that and actually develop into a modern community that actually, has an identity outside of iron mining. But that's fine. It is a core part of our history, but at the same time, it's the reason that's also holding us back, because people don't want to have this absurdity that we build in Lab West and we're going to lose our shirts. It doesn't happen that way. In 2014, when Cliffs closed Wabash Mines, our population actually grew in Lab West over those years, from census to census. We actually grew in 4 years. So we can get past this identity and this mentality that we're a mining town, but we're a town with a mine, and people should come and invest and come and don't be afraid to not ask the actual statistics on the ground and, just dismiss us when it comes to these kind of developments.
Yeah, I mean, fair enough. I guess, when we talk about something like it's a mining town, immediately that brings to the front of your mind boom bust. And boom bust is maybe not that attractive, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that either.
No, exactly, and you look from statistic to statistic here at Lab West. We've actually grown over the last probably. That we really had. So from the late 90s, after the last, interesting, the passing of Prime Minister Brian Mulroney. Brian Mulroney was the CEO actually of IOC during the 80s. And so he, so from his time there, about that era, up until this point right now, Lab West has actually continuously grown year over year. We've actually we've actually added value to the region all during that time. Both mines had expansions during those times. Both mines actually employs more people now over the span of time, and actually more companies have opened up in Labrador West, mine services and whatnot, in that period of time. We've actually on a continuous trajectory of growth, and now we're at a standstill because we can't seem to build a single house in Labrador West.
Yeah, and, I don't know if it's a unique challenge versus what we're seeing about building houses and the time associated with and the costs associated with right across the country. So how and why do you think there's a unique approach required in Labrador, and what does that look like?
Well, obviously, the cost of building in Labrador is a lot more expensive. I don't know if you remember the commercials, but there used to be a commercial that used to come on for Mary Brown's Chicken, and they give the price of the chicken, and then at the end of the thing it says a little more in Labrador. Well, that applies to everything. There always seems to be what we call the Labrador tax, where everything just seems to cost a little bit more. I'll argue it because we actually have better connection to the mainland than you guys, but that's a whole other debate for another day. But at the same day, there's this inherent cost of building up here. And we need to find a way to bridge that. And so a conversation that we've had, and we had it with, I guess now the former housing minister, Pike, and we also had it with a few other ministers there, is that there has to be some money unlocked for municipalities to be able to build new infrastructure, so roads, streets, water, sewer, street lights, that whole thing that normally a developer would, in a normal subdivision, would build. But we need to unlock some funding that to give the municipalities the ability to build this out, so that the developer's only task is to put new houses up in the region. And this way we can hopefully bring down some of the inherent cost to, a family wanting to buy a home or a developer wanting to make some rental units available in the region. Because right now there's not a single rental unit available in Labrador West. There hasn't been for almost a year. So this is where we're asking government's help, is to partner with us in these kind of endeavors, is so that we can actually do it. And we actually had a presentation from our cousin town, Vermont, which is just over the border here. And that's what they've been doing, is that they actually built put water, roads, streets, everything in, and then they had multiple developers come over and actually put up a few houses in the region, because they didn't have to build that kind of infrastructure. They just came in and put up houses, and they made them available as rental units. And they also have, in this Vermont subdivision that the municipality built out, a not-for-profit group managed to come up, and they're actually building 40 affordable units up there, because they didn't have to worry about the water, sewer, and all that. They came up and brought up these small, actually, these are really nice little duplexes that they're putting up there. So, it's almost like, the field of dreams. And actually, that's what the municipal person from Vermont who came down and gave the presentation said. It's like the field of dreams. You build it, they will come. But honestly, I think at this point in time, because we don't have that infrastructure in place right now, it's actually one of our biggest holdbacks some feedback we're getting. It's one of the biggest holdbacks we got, is that they can't bridge that affordability gap. But if we can help them, maybe we can actually put some roofs over some people's houses, over people's heads here in Lab West.
Don't mean to be going back consistently to Mayor Adams, but also saying, words are important. This is a paraphrase of what she said. Words are important, but we need action. We need action lists. So, in your opinion, what does an action list look like? Are we talking about some measurables, timelines for making some forward progress, whether it be on healthcare or housing or collaboration in the mining sector or whatever the case may be? So, what does an action list look like if you had to take pen to paper?
Oh, absolutely. So here's one of the things. So there used to be this task force in Labrador West when we still had the Labrador Affairs office here before it was closed, this current government closed it. And one of the items that they did look at, it was called the Regional Development Task Force. And it consisted of industry, it consisted of the municipalities and other stakeholders, and they would meet quarterly to discuss issues like housing, healthcare, stuff like that. Anyway, so that's gone. That was gone, and it's been gone for about 5 years now. Since then, we found that each municipality, everyone was just all of a sudden started working in silos. And what we need to do is actually bring back a task force. So I know there's some kind of ad hoc thing going on right now, but we actually need government to come, the provincial government to come on with the municipal governments, stakeholders in the region and things like that, to come down and actually make this list of actionables. Actual group of people that can actually sit down, have some research, and actually can sit down and actually discuss the unique challenges that there is to developing in Labrador, to recruiting and retaining in Labrador West, and all these other things. So this list is actually possible, but we need the provincial government to come to the table with some resources and actually put together this task force that actually could do this. And maybe at this task force we could see, maybe an individual or something hired to actually that's their job, is to make sure that this task force get these measurables and actually start working towards it and actually do some of the research and stuff that we probably need to do, because we're in a unique situation here.
That you are, Jordan. I appreciate you making time for the show today. Thanks for this.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Take care, my friend.
You too. Bye-bye. Jordan Brown, NDP member for Lab West. Let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to be talking about the life and times and the political legacy of the Right Honourable Brian Mulroney. Don't go away. Welcome back to the programme. Join us on line number 10 to talk about the death of Brian Mulroney is our friend and colleague Tim Powers. And good morning to you, Tim. You're on the air.
Patty, good to talk to you this morning. Yeah, Brian Mulroney, truly a transformative politician with a long history, in Newfoundland and Labrador. Just before we start the conversation, I'd say lots being said, about Hibernia, as there should be, and stuff he's done in the fishery. But his business career, in a lot of ways, starts off when he moved out of the legal realm in our province, when he was the president of the Iron Ore Company of Canada and spent a lot of time in Labrador City and Wabush.
100%. We just had that point being made by Jordan Brown, our most recent caller. Just before we get into 84 to 93, I think there's a fascinating case study to be had here. And, of course, transformative and the legacy he left and the big swings that he took and the number of big issues he was intimately involved in and right in the middle of. But I want to go back to 1972 for a second. So, of course, he wasn't really big on his legal studies. It turned out to be an excellent labour lawyer. He was a senior partner very early on in his career at the biggest law firm in Montreal, or biggest tax firm. It would be Howard, Kate and Ogilvy. But where he really made his splash after he met his then-to-be wife Mila at the Montreal Royal Tennis Club alongside the pool. Anyway, 1974, Premier Robert Bourassa appointed him to the Clich Commission, looking at instigating union violence in the construction industry. That put him on the Quebec national radar, on the Quebec provincial radar, and a big part of the national radar. This was the part of the skyrocket to his prominence.
Yeah, because that Clich Commission was so prominent in Quebec in the day that it was televised. And, not like today where you could turn on the television, it'd be 8,700 options, you'd see it. And Brian Mulroney was beamed into people's homes at night, and he was, fighting against corruption, fighting for proper organized labor and the like. And people saw him and became impressed with him, and that began his career. Because people forget, before he succeeded in 1983 in becoming the PC leader, beating John Crosbie, beating Joe Clark, he ran in 1976 in large measure. That was because of the profile he built then and the appeal that he was able to establish, particularly in Quebec, but elsewhere.
Yeah, that was the key to the success. He did what his political hero John Diefenbaker could not do, who was a unilingual person, but, consecutive majority governments, and in large part, whether it be the resentment that Quebecers had about the Meach Accord, and that was somewhat tempered by the Charlottetown Accord, but in 1984, 211 seats out of 282 in 84, and the election was on September the 4th of that year. Compare the popularity then with what was the exact opposite upon his demise politically in 1993. It's an amazing road.
Well, and I've said this before, but I love this line. So Alan Gregg, who used to be very prominent on CBC, was on the Insiders panel at issue panel, for years. He was Brian Mulroney's pollster, and he used to go into the caucus then when Mr. Mulroney was there, and he said, well, the bad news is more people think Elvis is still alive, sir, than support you. I think so Justin Trudeau, if he wants to take any comfort in anything, he hasn't reached those Brian Mulroney level numbers yet, but quite the political collapse, which then led to a whole new Conservative Party, which Brian Mulroney was very instrumental in forming and blessing.
And, we can talk about NAFTA and GST, but just stick with the Quebec relationship for a second. Mm-hmm. And I think when asked about this issue, you could see almost whether it be betrayal or disappointment or sadness in his eyes, and this is about Lucien Bouchard. So Bouchard was his Quebec lieutenant, right? He was eventually the Minister of the Environment in Mulroney's cabinet, but then he defected to begin the Parti Québécois. I think that dogged him for a long time, and it kind of did compromise some of his relations inside the province and, of course, with Bouchard.
Well, they were buddies at law school in Laval University. They went to school together. Brian Mulroney recruited Lucien Bouchard to run for the Progressive Conservative Party. In some ways, and different historians have written this, Bouchard may have been viewed by Mulroney as a potential successor. But the failure of Meech Lake, and that causes some tension and tumult with Newfoundland and Labrador and former Premier Clyde Wells, the failure of Charlottetown. Meech Lake led to Mr. Bouchard stepping off, though reports, according to Mr. Bouchard, that after all of these years of acrimony over the last number of months, they buried the hatchet and were talking again, which is so vintage Brian Mulroney. He probably knew his time was limited and wanted to reconnect with his friend, even though they both had very pronounced roles in shaping Canada and creating the Bloc Québécois and some of the challenges that we still deal with today.
Yeah, and, Mulroney, insofar as a statesman and the work he did with Reagan and Thatcher and others is, historical stuff, but he had that ability to speak eloquently. He could tell you to go to HE double hockey sticks, but it didn't feel like that or sound like the tone and tenor that we hear in politics today.
No, look, because he was a consummate performer, right, in the House. Brian Tobin has a great story, of course, and Brian was a member of the Brat Pack before he became premier, and that Brat Pack really irritated Brian Mulroney, the Brat Pack, sorry. And there were a number of cabinet ministers they were able to bring down. But Brian Tobin tells the story of going on a trade mission to Ireland when Brian Mulroney was prime minister, and Brian was included. Tobin was included, and Brian Tobin had a couple of his kids. And Brian Mulroney came over and was charming to them, gave them ties, and he knew what politics was supposed to be. There was the theater in the front, but there was the humanity behind. And seeing his rival, Mr. Chrétien, last night acknowledging that, right, using the hockey analogy that they were opponents on the ice and they'd go after each other, but off they would have a beer, though neither of them really drink. Mr. Mulroney hadn't for years at that time, but that was a different time, different era. It wasn't personal. It wasn't 24 hours a day. It wasn't character assassination, even though Mulroney was not hindered by getting his fists up from time to time. But, he just treated people well, and he cared about people.
Yeah, it sounds like a political mullet, business in the front, party in the back, as you just described. We talk about the fact that he was in the middle of so many things. NAFTA has been much heralded as improving relationships with the United States, our most significant trading partner. It also, though, in honest reflection, it did look like the beginning of some of the exploitation of Mexican workers. 13 years after NAFTA was signed, the country only created half the jobs that it did in the 13 years prior. It's made goods and services less expensive in the country, but it has come with some sort of cost. And just to, for a bare rundown. Yes. So it cancelled the National Energy Programme. It was replaced with another entity, but he did cancel it. Then we mentioned Meech Lake, privatisation of Petro-Canada, NAFTA, the GST
Air
that
Canada too, privatisation of Air Canada.
Absolutely, the Air Canada privatisation as well. Sanctions against South Africa and apartheid, the Acid Rain Treaty with Ronald Reagan. He was at the helm during the Gulf War, the Oka crisis, which dogged him for quite a long time, bringing in the military to deal with the protesters. He created the Emergencies Act, which then was invoked for the first time ever by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Big time involvement with the Environmental Protection Act. The Nunavut land claims was settled under him. And then, not to speak ill of the dead, but what also dogged him for years is the Airbus scandal. Even though he was awarded an out-of-court settlement in 1997, a libel suit against the RCMP, settled by the then Liberal government, he was taken to task as late as, say, 2008 and grilled publicly about it. His relationship with Karl-Heinz Schreiber, while he was waiting to be extradited to Germany, was dropping hints that Mulroney was more involved than people realised and, never really said the quiet part out loud. But this did dog him forever and a day, because once you're attached to something like Airbus scandals and thoughts of brown paper bags filled with $100 bills, it's something that never really rubbed off of the Prime Minister. How do you think that affected him personally? And do you think that's actually part of his legacy? Once again, I have no interest in demeaning the man upon his demise, but it's still part of his story.
Yeah, it's part of his story, and I think he's written and talked about it, too, about how it was the greatest mistake of his life, intertwining himself with Karl-Heinz Schreiber. There was the Oliphant Commission that did rap his knuckles and said he didn't act the way he could have. But I think, he just continued to work through that and continue to make a difference wherever he could. I mean, the two examples I can give you that I know personally, he was very eager in 2020 to speak publicly about White Rose, and he appeared at a fundraiser for Chess Crosby, doing Chess Crosby a favor, because of course Chess was the son of John, who was very loyal to, and he spoke compellingly and compassionately about why White Rose was an important investment. The other story I know about Mulroney's humanity that directly kind of connected to me, my business partner Doug Young, Liberal cabinet minister in the Chrétien government, he and Brian Mulroney went to school together at St. Thomas University. Before it was a university, they were two underprivileged kids who went there at the time. Brian Mulrooney and Frank McKenna started a $500,000 scholarship in Doug's name to help kids give back. So while there's certainly, as there are in all of us, blemishes on his record, the guy never stopped trying, whether it be public policy or, getting kids into school. That is why he's so revered. The final thing I'd say, too, is, look at the tweet Seamus put out. I mentioned this earlier, but, when Seamus had his struggles, which we all know about, and Seamus courageously has talked about, one of the first people who reached out was Brian Mulrooney and was there. And there are so many stories of his humanity, and I think that, Paddy, in a large measure helps address some of the poor decisions he himself acknowledged that he made, because he always kept trying to do better.
Yeah, as a ruddy-faced English or Irish kid, I'm not trying to besmirch or to blemish Brian Mulrooney. And, of course, from a working-class background. And, he was the first Quebecer to lead the Conservatives in the 20th century. The community he grew up in, the boy from Bay Como, largely Francophone. Very few of his playmates even spoke any English. So from there to sitting in the big chair as the Prime Minister and everything in between makes for a fascinating character sketch and a story to read. I really appreciate you making time this morning, Tim, and condolences on your loss.
Well, thank you. And I just say one last thing. I think people should know, true family man. One of the things Jane Crosby always has said about the Mulrooneys, how much they love their family. And having had the pleasure of meeting the four kids and knowing three of them reasonably well, he was a great dad too, which is not the easiest thing to do in politics. Anyway, thanks, my friend. Good to talk to you this morning.
Always my pleasure, Tim. Take care. All right, take care. There you go. Goodbye. To Tim Powers. Let's take a break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the programme. Just before we get to line number 3, so the warning that there's whiteout conditions persistent around Windsor Lake as usual. So if you're heading towards that area, be aware. Let's go to line number 3. Good morning, Gerald. You're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy. How are you this morning?
Great today. How about you?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good.
Good.
Paddy, the reason why I'm calling today, Paddy, is regards to the recreation scout license.
Okay.
I don't know if you're familiar with that, but
a little bit.
Apparently, the fisheries or whoever comes up with all these bylaws and stuff to apply for a license is making it so hard for a person to even apply for it that people just give them up on it.
Why? Where's the difficulty lie? What's the problem with the application?
Well, for one thing, I think you got to have a computer science degree to go in and even apply for it, and you can't go to the fisheries like people did in the past to fill out an application and send in. They don't take that anymore. You got to apply to the National Online Licensing. And Paddy, there's a lot of people who don't have computer skills. There's a lot of people who don't have cell phones, and the only way you can get a license if you got one of these and know how to use it. I applied for my license and my wife's license, and I know I was probably an hour trying to get through, trying to get it set up. You got to go in and you got to go in and set up an account. And you got to get a GC key number. Then now this year they got this authentication code that you got to download this app on your phone and go in that way. And I can't go in to apply for my buddy. You know what I mean?
No, because everyone has to have their own unique code.
Right, exactly. Right. So anyway, Paddy, that's not all that is making it so hard. It's like in the past, like you go out, you throw your rake over. You only allow 50 scouts out, mind you. You throw your rake over, and if you're not an able-bodied person, that if you get a few scallops in that rake and you get some rocks in that rake, you're not getting it up by your boat. So we've been using a pot auler, okay? Same that people use for like on their lobster pots in. They got that taken out, so you can't use an auler anymore. So they're telling me now that, like I went in that surgery on both shoulders. I'm very weak in the shoulder, so they're telling me that I can't go scallop raking because I'm not allowed to use my auler to all that rake. The safety part of it is if you got an auler aboard your boat, you get hooked up in the bottom. You're supposed to get your rake up, or you're driving ashore and you throw your anchor overboard, and you can't get it up. You're supposed to get it up. You got to cut it all off. $500 rake gone. They don't They don't see all that stuff. So whoever coming up with all these laws don't even got a clue about scald lions or scald dragon.
For people who are injured or unable to do it, like for instance in the world of hunting big or small game, in the world of the recreational food fishery, are you able to get someone to do the scallop raking on your behalf? On your license?
Not allowed.
Not allowed?
Not allowed. No. I'm not allowed to go out and get my uncle or my grandfather, who's probably not strong enough to be aboard a boat. If he's aboard a boat, yes, I can go out and if I got a hauler aboard a boat, I can get his sets of scallops, right? If he got a license with me, he got his license, I got mine. I'm allowed to get my sets of scallops, and then he get his sets of scallops. We got a license. Me and my wife do it, right? But I'm not allowed to say to my grandfather, all right, buddy, you can stay home because you can't get aboard the boat. I'll get your scallop license. I'll get your scallops for you. I'm not allowed to do it. Now, meantime, a person who got a disability is allowed to go out and shoot a moose for somebody that's sitting at home. So I think there's some discrimination on this part for a disability person, a disabled person, what have you, that I think they're being discriminated against because they're not allowed to get scallops.
Yeah, and
I called my MHA, Elvis Lovis. He passed the buck to somebody else. I called my MP up here in Grand Falls, and he never even called me back.
But so
I had a couple more people said, sorry, I had a couple more people that called him. He never called him back. So where do we go from this?
Well, it belongs in Mr. Small's office, as you pointed out. So there's no good reason why someone who's not able-bodied should be able to appoint someone who is to go out and execute the scallop fishery. And you could do it just about everywhere in the province. There's a couple of marine protected areas. I know there's one out in Eastport that you can't do it. I can't remember what the other one is off the top of my head. Maybe Gilbert Bay, possibly. But anyway, and is it still the case that the recreational scallop fishery opens up on January the 1st and closes on December 31st?
That's right. Yeah. I'm allowed to go get 50 scallops
every day.
I'm not allowed to have no more than. I'm not 100% sure, Paddy.
You're not allowed to have more than 100
in my position.
Yeah, you can't have more than 100
in my position. That's right. Exactly. Yeah. But Paddy, the reason they're saying that the hauler is tearing up grounds. Paddy, if you know anything about a pot hauler, I'm throwing my boat. I throw my rake over. I'm dragging the rake along the bottom, towing it with my boat. And the only way I'm using my hauler is to haul that rake up aboard my boat. That's the only way we're using a hauler. Now, how can anybody tell me that we're in the bottom? So somebody ain't got a clue what they're talking about.
Yeah, there's something missing there. So a couple of the points you make, and I think the big one that's going to stick with me, and I'll try to get some rationale or an answer to it, is why, unlike hunting, can you not appoint someone to execute your license for you?
Nobody don't know. Nobody can answer that question. Right? So, Paddy, I've been tempted to call the last 2 days, and my wife wouldn't let me go if I do it. But anyway, I finally got my nerve up this morning. I said, I got to call because I was talking to a guy yesterday, and he told me, he said, me and my brother, he said, usually goes out every year, gets our few scallops, all the rake up with our hour, but he said, we can't do it. He said, we're 70-odd years old, and he said, we cannot all rake up board. We've got food with rocks into it or whatever. But he said, we can't go scallop anymore. So that's taking away his rights to get a few scallops.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense, nor does it sound fair. Gerald, I'm going to take the break, but I'm glad you summoned up the want and the courage to call this morning.
Well, thank you very much for your time, old buddy, and I hope any listeners out there that thinks the same way I do, that they'll call in and voice their concerns as well as I did.
They're more than welcome to do it. Stay in touch.
Thanks, buddy.
All right, Gerald. Bye-bye. All right, let's take a break right on time. Come back to say good morning to the co-chair of Happy City St. John's. That's David Brake. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number one. Say good morning to the co-chair of Happy City St. John's. That's David Brake. David, you're on the air.
Hello, Paddy. Nice to be on the air with you again.
Welcome back. What's on your mind this morning?
Well, your listeners may or may not know there is a by-election coming up in less than 2 weeks' time. We're going to be getting a lot of elections coming up. This is the first of many, I expect. But for now, March 12th is the election day, but before that, Happy City has managed to pull together all of the candidates for Ward 4, and again, we'll be bringing them together in a room with our moderator, who is from Mon University, Dr. Elizabeth Schwartz. We're going to bring them together for a live 1-hour session, but before we do that, we'd like to have some questions from the public, especially if there are any listeners who are in Ward 4 in the city. But today is the last day for them to send us questions for us to sift through so that we can put them to the candidates and then hear what they have to say.
Happy City must have their own list of questions that they're going to consider. I don't know if you want to speak to them on the programme this morning. I would imagine most of them are fairly predictable, and the candidates should be already mentally prepared for some of the obvious issues that are going to be broached. But what do you think the agenda looks like?
Well, I mean, I think the key thing we'd like to stress is how important the city actually is in people's lives. I mean, people think, oh, it's just like collecting the bins, and maybe maybe they're exercised about snow or but recreation. The city is a crucial. What the Ward 4 councillors will do if you elect the right ones is absolutely vital to your life, and not least issues around planning the way the city of St. John's will grow in future, getting prepared for climate change, and I think really though we're reaching out to ask the public what they'd like to ask. We're acting as a kind of we're just bringing the candidates together, and we want to make sure that what the people of Ward 4 feel their issues are is what gets heard. So they just need to visit happycity.ca, and one of the recent posts on the front page contains a link to the form to submit the questions. Then, and we hope that people will also turn up to watch the debate on the 6th at 8 in the evening. But even if they miss that, they'll be able to tune in later. We're also bringing together all of what they've said before. Now, interestingly, one of the candidates has run twice before, and one of the candidates has run once before, and they talked to us back then in 2020 and 2021. So you can go back and take a look at what they said then, and you can also go back and you can also look at all the things that they've said in the current campaign. So if you really want to take a deep dive, come and visit us at happycity.ca. Take a look around at what they've been saying, and give us your thoughts. We'll put them to candidates, and you can hear what they have to say. Because so far there's been a number of straight interviews, just one-on-one with the candidates. But this will be a chance for all four of them to address each other's concerns and to react to the questions people put.
Fair enough. So, David, has Happy City in the past, or do you plan this by-election go around to endorse one candidate or another, or is it simply to allow people to hear from them?
No, we don't. We're not about taking sides here. We're just trying to make sure that all the issues that matter to the public get raised, and I think there's a real gap. It's kind of sad, but we would like for there to have been a public meeting or a media-run round-table thing where the candidates could do this. But everyone's overstretched, and there's a lot of many different important issues. So we're happy to step forward and kind of provide that space for that to happen.
Fair enough. So, folks, if you're interested, go to happycity.ca and submit your questions for consideration for the upcoming March 6th roundtable or quasi-debate. Appreciate the time, David. Good luck with the event. Let us know how it works out.
We will. And thanks very much for letting us let people know.
No problem at all. Talk again soon.
Take care.
You too. Bye-bye. David Brake, co-chair, Happy City St. John's. Let's go to line number 2. Taking more to the Executive Director of the Coalition of Persons with Disabilities. That's Nancy Reid. Nancy, you're on the air.
Hi, Patty.
Hi.
Great to talk to you guys today.
Happy to have you on.
I just wanted to, thanks so much. I wanted to clarify a couple of points that I just heard on Openline. I will start with a bit of an apology. I'm on the road right now, and connecting through Bluetooth in my vehicle, so I hope that I don't go into a low service area.
Yeah, and I know where you're going to go, because he did make a couple of assertions that were not exactly 100% accurate. I know where he was going, and sometimes I don't feel like I should be admonishing people or preaching at them. But anyway, go ahead.
No, I certainly appreciate that. So I just want to clarify for the listening audience, because I certainly feel for the challenges that this particular individual is facing, and I certainly agree with some of the positions that he spoke to. But just want to clarify a couple of things. And I'm not going to speak to the scallop fishery. It's not something that I know about. I don't have the details in that space. But what I will say is there's a lot of differences, I guess, in different applications and different licensing processes for hunters and for fishers in this province. And the scallop fishery is part of the federal program, as he mentioned, the online licensing system. And within that system, there are a number of different types of fisheries, so I won't go there. But I will mention a couple of things about the federal system and other fisheries. And one of them being the recreational food fishery, as we all know. And within that, a person who, is identified as a person with a significant disability and, is certified in that way through the fisheries DFO, that particular individual is somebody who can appoint a fisher person, and that fisher can go on the water, and the person with the disability can actually stay at home while that person, gets their fish each day. And so that's what we would hope for is that people would be given that equity, and that if a person has a disability and is not able to get in the boat and go and do their fishing, that somebody else could do that for them. We applaud that one for sure. I'll say then that we have a salmon fishery, a small salmon fishery in our province for inland waters, and within that, an individual who might have a disability and unable to actually, fly fish, could appoint a fisher to do that for them. However, within the salmon fishery, the person with the disability actually has to be at the river or within 100 meters of the appointed fisher person for them. So there's a discrepancy, again, within the federal systems and licensing and opportunities in that way. But when it comes to the big game hunt, and specifically moose and caribou in our province, and I guess bear, but I haven't really considered that, so I'll leave that one for another day. But for the moose hunt specifically, persons with disabilities can certainly apply for the Disabled Hunter Program, and within that, persons can appoint a hunter to hunt for them. However, the person with a disability always must be within 800 meters of the appointed hunter in the area. Now, if the hunter, whether that be the person with the disability or the designated hunter, shoots an animal and the animal needs to be tracked, which often happens, then the appointed hunter can actually track that animal and go farther than the 800 meters of distance between the two individuals, obviously to finish harvesting that animal. But what we, from the disability community, would like to see is an opportunity for persons with disabilities to be able to stay at home and actually appoint that hunter, and that hunter go into the woods and get the animal for them in a similar way that we're seeing with the food fishery in the province. Many people in our province, rely on the hunt on moose for a source of food, and other people enjoy it for the sport, and both. And even as a person with a disability, if you can't even if you're a person who can't actually shoot or track an animal, there's something really enjoyable for many people about just being in the environment, participating in the hunt, the smells and the feel and the hear, what you're experiencing there. And we want to enable people with disabilities, or give them the equity that they deserve, so that if they want to be able to participate in the hunt in a way that's meaningful for them, they can, but that they will not be denied access to the food source. And for many people with disabilities, simply they cannot get into the hunting area. And if they are not somebody who can do that, then they're being denied that access to the food source.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why they make a big deal of having to be X number of meters away from the shot that falls a moose or whatever, because if that's simply about the fact that, well, we want to ensure that there's been consent given to this particular hunter to prosecute the moose hunt for this individual, as opposed to maybe, just maybe, or possibly someone simply stole that license from that individual and manufactured paperwork. I suppose that's the rationale behind it, but certainly there's ways to figure it out. If I'm a hunter and I'm asked to provide the paperwork and the tag for that particular animal, and I'm hunting on behalf of someone else, it's easy enough to verify it at that point, as opposed to make someone who is physically unable to be there, you know, in all fairness. So I think we're just kind of putting stipulations in place that are unnecessary hurdles.
I often agree with that, Patty, and full disclosure, I am actually a hunter. I participate in the big game hunt whenever I can get a license. I really enjoy hunting, and I am a person who uses a wheelchair. It's something that I enjoy, and myself and my husband, he's also a hunter. He does not have a disability, and so he is always my designated hunter. Sometimes I can get within range myself, and I've shot several moose. Other times that he has actually, harvested the animal for me, but I'm always with him, and I'm in a place where I can do that. Everybody doesn't have that experience or opportunity, and when it comes to the licensing and the process, as the person with a disability, as a disabled hunter, I actually just fill out a paper that's that I sign and say this person is my designated hunter, and then if he is tracking an animal, he's got that paper with him. He's also got the license, and of course I'm in the field, probably back of the vehicle or whatever. He's got to track an animal, and so it's all available. My designated hunter's name is in the license. Everything is above board and easily seen. And sure, there's ways that people can abuse systems. There's abuse in every system that we see. But I think that the opportunity to provide equity for persons with disabilities is a greater reason to do that than the potential for a few people to abuse the system.
Right, fair enough. I really appreciate the time, Nancy. Thanks for the call.
Thanks so much.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. All right, let me get the proper button. Before we get to the news, let's go to line number 3. Good morning, Nina. You're on the air.
Hi.
Hi.
I just wanted to say thank you to Claudette Burns and Linda Swain yesterday. I lost my wallet downtown, and I was in such a panic, and I called them, and within 10 minutes they had it on the radio. I didn't recover my wallet, but I just wanted to say they were so kind and empathetic. So that's all.
They're the best. Let's just put it that way. So hopefully you do get reunited with your wallet, and of course, whether it be Claudette or Linda, that's the go-to mode of operations around here. So I'm not surprised to hear this at all, and I appreciate the time. Let us know if you ever do get the wallet back.
Yeah, I just hate to feel like the yabba dabba doo girl, but I had to phone and say thank you.
I'm glad you did.
Okay.
Thanks, Nina. All right, bye-bye. Here we go. Bouquet to Claudette and to Linda. Let's take a break. When we come back, the ED at Trades NL is Darren King. He's next. Don't go away.
You're listening to a rebroadcast of VOCM Open Line. Have your say by calling 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626 and listen live weekday mornings at 9 a.m.
Welcome back to the program. Let's go to line number 1. So going to the Executive Director at Trades NL. That's Darren King. Darren, you're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy. How are you today?
Best kind. How about you?
Good. I'm great. Thanks for taking my call. I really appreciate it.
No problem.
I wanted to just take a moment of your time to chat a little about the bull arm RFP. And just, I guess, by way of introduction, as many people will be aware, government has issued a request for proposals for future use and or development of the bull arm fabrication site, and the deadline initially was supposed to be the end of February yesterday. It's now extended to March the 15th. And so I wanted to just have a chat with you for a couple of moments about what that means for us in Trades NL and what it really means for people in the province, and why I think people need to be tuned into sort of the process and where the process might lead. So as you know, of course, our membership built the site way back when we had the very first project there, the Hibernia development, and we've constructed all major projects that have been done there to date. And when that site has been operational, there's been tremendous spin-off benefits for not only local communities in the Arnold's Cove and area, but as far away as Glovertown and Clarenville area. And in most cases, when there's been work on that site, there's been work down in Marystown Shipyard and in other parts of the province. So I guess for that reason, it's important from our perspective that whatever happens to the site, we need to maintain an ability to construct resource development projects out there. The other piece I would say, Paddy, is we do believe, though, that there is an opportunity for more work in Bull Arm than we've been seeing. It's a world-class site, and there's, I think, at least potential for that site to be operational on a more regular basis, doing smaller scopes of work while still maintaining the ability to do resource development work should the opportunity arise in the future, whether that be oil and gas, such as the Equinor Beta Nord project or some wind hydrogen projects. There's a tremendous port there and other facilities that would work in either of those resort development opportunities. So I just want to kind of raise the flag on it for communities and for people out there that is at play right now. There's a number of proponents that I'm aware of that are looking at the site, and I'm not sure exactly what their business model entails, but I'm very hopeful that it does entail a scope where it's available for future resource development work, but that there's a vision to attract more work on a regular basis that will obviously bring work for our membership, bring work for local contractors, and equally as important, support local communities in the region.
Fair enough. What gives you pause for concern here that the facility wouldn't be utilised for the exact task it was built for?
Well, the only reason for pause for concern is that the RFP can be a lease or sale agreement, and if the site were sold, it's not out of the realm of possibility that a private developer could buy the site and not make it available for future development. So if a company like Equinor or some other wanted to come in and build a gravity-based structure or do subsea work, the gates could be locked and it could be unavailable, which could in turn potentially force construction work out of the province.
Yeah, fair enough. But, it's like currently, some of the concerns were, say, for instance, when DF Barnes took over operations, that it wasn't a unionised site, but people were paid the exact same or more, and the work was flowing, and the work was productive, and it was getting done. So maybe you know something I don't know, or we're not filling in all the boxes here as to why you think that site will not be utilised as is intended, because I'd be shocked if that was the case, and I'd be shocked if government accepted an offer or a bid that didn't include exactly that.
Sure. So I guess two responses to your comment. First of all, my advocacy at this point is not for unionized work. It's just
I wasn't trying to imply that. Good.
Sure. And secondly, I'm not suggesting that government won't support the model that I've talked about. All I'm saying, though, is that I don't think anybody should leave it to chance and trust. We've seen lots of things happen in the past over the last 25 or 30 years where decisions get made and people get engaged after the fact. I don't have any reason to suspect government wouldn't be pursuing the same kind of model. I'm just raising it as a flag for people and saying that I think people should be tuned into it and paying attention to what's happening, because the last thing I think any of us would want to see is that the site would be passed over or sold in a manner that restricts the use only to the person or to the entity that buys the site. So that's really the purpose of my call, is just and we've been engaged, Paddy, with local communities and local chambers of commerce. We wrote some letters just to say, hey, make sure this is on your radar. It's important for the economic development of the region and the entire province, really, going forward. And we just want to make sure people are tuned in. That's all. And it's not raising flags as much as raising awareness.
Fair enough, because you're right in saying that generally any of the pushback or feedback is offered after the fact, which is too late. The horse has left the barn. So, Darren, just in generic terms, here we are, April 9th, a decision coming on World Energy GH2. We know some of the conversations that were had in Lab West about the opportunities therein, which would include, of course, mining expansion and other areas of life. But then the big question would be, the skilled trades that are here in the province or in the country to accommodate some of these big projects, because some of them might all come in one fell swoop. Now, that's the cockeyed optimism, I guess, inside me speaking. So whether it be wind energy, onshore or offshore, and or Beta Nord, and or expansion at Bull Arm, or wherever the case may be, constructions of the hospitals and penitentiaries, this could all happen very, very quickly. Does that sound like good news, or is that also give you some trepidation knowing that we probably don't have the manpower if a number of these all come at the same time?
Well, it's a little bit of both. It's good news for sure. It's good news for the trades workers, good news for the province, and for local communities and developers. We're pretty actively engaged on that file, Paddy, both internally. We just recently launched a new College of Skilled Trades NL to open up seats for training. We're doing a partnership on a project with Econext, looking at the labour requirements for the wind hydrogen projects. Down the road, the big thing here that I see happening that I haven't seen happen in the past is that there's a lot more planning going into the wind hydrogen, a lot more engagement with labour and other stakeholders to plan in advance of the projects. I don't think we'll have difficulty supplying labour in the province between Trades NL and non-union side. But I do believe it's important that the planning continue, because if we're aware in advance of the numbers of trades that we're going to require for these projects, and we believe that we're going to be short, then it provides an opportunity for us, College of the North Atlantic, and other training institutes to train up people and make sure that we have the skilled trades opportunities that are available. At the end of the day, if there's more jobs available, then there's going to be trades workers that are currently existing. And I think that's good news, as long as we know it well enough in advance so that local people, whether that's youth or those who want to retrain, can do the appropriate training and make themselves available for those opportunities and take advantage of it.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to say this properly, but government might have to take this into careful consideration with maybe staggered approvals. Now, that's not going to be welcomed by various proponents, but it might be pragmatic. So I don't know how that works, but we can't set ourselves up for disaster, because that could happen. Let's say, for instance, if one of the big projects all of a sudden says, even after a green light is given or a final approval, and we can't find the workers, and we know that government has piled all these projects on top of each other, which of course comes with a built-in problem. So government might have to be very wise and strategic with the pace of play here.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, and I've been advocating for that even back to my days previously when I was in politics myself. I think we've made some mistakes along the way. At one point with Muskrat Falls and Hebron and Valley project operating simultaneously. Like, in retrospect, the staggering of those projects, I think could have made a big difference to the province. So I think you're absolutely right. As an observation with no inside information, I would say it appears to me that nature might stagger these projects anyway, based on what I'm seeing. My sense is that these proponents are all at very different stages of development. So if you get, a particular project like World Energy, they seem to be out front, at least right now. By the time they get civil work done and move into mechanical side, then that frees up those trades to do other civil work when another project starts. So some of this might just take care of itself by way of the process that's unfolding. But I absolutely agree with you. The best scenario would be if these project start dates staggered, by a year or so each.
Yeah, and that might happen organically, as you rightfully point out. So I guess it all remains to be seen. And that's not an endorsement or a condemnation of any industry and or potential approval. But anyway, people understand what we're getting at. Very quickly, has there been anything inside the umbrella of Trades NL, any one union or another, who is no longer being represented by Trades NL? Like, for instance, has the Carpenters Union or any others splintered out or no longer in the building? Because there's a question being raised on that front.
Yeah, the carpenters and millwrights are currently not a part of Trades NL. That's not a public discussion as much as an internal issue that we're working through. But currently, as we speak today, they're not part of the umbrella of Trades NL.
No further elaboration available?
No, it's certainly. It's not even an issue really that's for me to discuss. It's at my council level, and it's between the business managers and the internationals. So it's things that we're working through. Things happen in families from time to time, and you splinter off, and you have disagreements. And the hope would be that that'll rectify itself in due course. But having said all that, in terms of the work that we do provincially and nationally, we're continuing to work with the carpenters. They're partners with us on the West White Rose project in Argentia, and they'll continue to be working with us on future projects, the carpenters and the millwrights, So from a perspective of someone who's looking to use the trades, I don't think you'll see a particularly big issue there. We'll continue to work together. But what's happening right now is more of an internal operational issue that we're working through.
I appreciate the time this morning, Darren. Thanks.
Thanks, Paddy, and I'll look forward to probably giving you a call in another week or so. We've got a few other topics outside of Bull Arm that are happening that I'd love to have a chat with you further about.
Happy to take them on.
Take care. Have a great weekend.
You too, Darren. Bye-bye.
All the best. Bye-bye.
Darren King, Executive Director of Trades NL. Let's take a break. When we come back, on line number 2 is Richard Cashin. Looking forward to that one. Don't go away. Welcome back. Before we get to Mr. Cashin, a quick traffic update on 7. Joanne, you're on the air.
Hi, we're just going into on the Outer Ring Road, almost to the Paradise turnoff. There's nothing but the road is nothing but a sheet of ice. There's one accident that has at least 5 to 6 vehicles involved off the road on both sides of the road. Right down from that, maybe a kilometre down from that, there's another one, and probably a half a kilometre down from that, there's another one. So just avoid that area, I would say, altogether if you can. There's not but a sheet of ice.
I appreciate the heads up. I've got a couple of text messages from buddies reporting some terrible conditions in and around town too. So you just heard from Joanne. If you were considering using the Outer Ring Road to traverse your way in and around Paradise, for instance, don't do it. Certainly not now. Make safe travels for yourself, Joanne, and thanks for the heads up.
Thank you. No problem. Thanks.
All right. Bye-bye. All right, let's keep going. Let's go to line number 2. Good morning, Richard Cashin. You're on the air.
Thank you very much, Patty. Well, first of all, I want to correct something that Tim Powers said.
Okay.
He said Brian Mulrooney attended St. Thomas University. Brian Mulrooney went to high school at St. Thomas College, which was the same location in the Miramichi. His university was at St. Francis Xavier, where I attended. He was 1 year behind me. So I've known Brian since way back in that time, and we've been friends and talk regularly. And I was able to say to him in one of our calls within the last few years that even my liberal friends agree that he was one of the most significant and accomplished prime ministers in modern times. I would say there were two who made that cut, Lester Pearson and Brian Mulrooney, the two outstanding politicians that in my lifetime.
Richard, where do you point to for some of his greatest accomplishments? What do you mean by that?
Well, first of all, free trade and the GST. The GST, I had a friend of mine who was not a Tory, who disagreed with the Liberals and NDP, and she said to me, the GST is going to affect people who buy BMWs. So I think the Liberals were dead wrong on that. And though, as a matter of fact, the GST saved the Chrétien government. Martin was able to do things that he wouldn't have been able to do and enhance the Chrétien regime in a way that wouldn't have been possible without Brian Mulrooney. And the other thing was, of course, a minor in the world, but major for us, was his support of Crosby and getting jurisdiction offshore for Newfoundland. And then on the international scene, his ability to convince Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan to support the release of Mandela, that was a international achievement of the first order.
Well, I mean, certainly as a statesman or a diplomat, when you're a medium-sized power like Canada, to be able to get Thatcher and Reagan on the same page is an achievement in and of itself. And on GST, people will bemoan consumption taxes, but you're right, Paul Martin was able to do a lot of balancing of the books, along with some borrowing from other pots of money inside the arms of government. But, I thought it was, and I said it at the time, and I've been hammered for saying it, I think it was politically and economically or financially a mistake to roll back a couple of points by Stephen Harper. It was political pandering.
Stephen Harper, you see, I went to school with a number of successful Red Tories, and I won't name them. I don't know what Brian did, but a couple of my Red Tory friends, they left the party when Harper became Prime Minister, the most notable of which was Senator Lowell Murray, who also was at St. Avex with Brian and with me. And as a matter of fact, I think it was Senator Lowell Murray that recruited Brian Mulrooney into the Conservative Party, because Mulrooney came from a family that, in my view, was probably traditionally liberal. And Mulrooney was progressive. And in the battle of Meech Lake, I sided with Mulrooney, a progressive conservative, against a very conservative liberal named Clyde Wells.
Absolutely. And, you think back to the era of politics when we're talking about Mulrooney. You can envision Broadbent and John Turner and Brian Mulrooney having their differences, and sometimes vehemently, but without the acrimony and ad hominem that kind of rules the political class today.
Well, yeah, I think that's correct. Because I was there in Parliament with I was before Mulroney was there, but certainly or Broadbent, but certainly Turner was there then, and but the other major accomplishment I mentioned was, of course, in Newfoundland was the offshore jurisdiction for us. So I think Mulroney will go down in history as one of the most accomplished and successful politicians of all time.
Well, and coming with big swings, sometimes there's big misses, but big achievements at the same time. So it's a fascinating tale if you look back to his university days, and I'm glad you corrected the book, the records on that, from St. Yves to being hired at the biggest law firm in Montreal and then appointed to the Glitch Commission, and then all the way through his political career. It's a fascinating roadmap that I really enjoyed reading again last evening. And on a personal note, Richard, as a friend and former classmate, Tim Powers was also quick to say, and thankfully so, about he as a person and as a family man and as a father of four. So can you reflect some personal interactions with Brian Mulroney that weren't necessarily inherently linked with politics?
Well, I remember, I don't know quite, I just remember that when we were students at St. Yves, the university UPI hadn't been created. It was St. Dunstan's University, and Campbell merged that with the Prince of Wales Junior College to create UPI, but they were a continuing champion in collegiate debates. And one time Mulroney came to me because we drew St. Dunstan's as they were the defending champions. And Brian said, we're going to beat them. And we went to St. Dunstan's and got a unanimous decision. We enjoyed it tremendously. Some of our classmates said that we were the two top debaters. We should only go with one team because it was too heavy, because you could only debate in once. But Brian said, we're going to beat them, and we did. And we've been friends ever since. I talked to him regularly. The last conversation was last fall. And in fact, I almost phoned him yesterday. I didn't know he had died, of course, but I saw him on television a week or two ago, and I was telling a friend of mine, he just looked dramatically changed from when I talked to him around Christmas time. And because I knew he was battling cancer. And as I said, we talked regularly and kept in touch, even though we were on different sides politically, but we did have a friendship that was, and he was very skillful with people. I mean, people have mentioned this. Before he left politics, his poll ratings were terrible, but he still charmed his caucus, as I heard Charest say on TV last night. They were down in the polls. They'd have a meeting of caucus, and Brian had a real gift of dealing with people, and the caucus loved him and really supported him.
Richard, I appreciate you making time for the program this morning and reflecting on the life and times of Brian Mulroney, and of course your friend. So my condolences, sir.
Thank you very much.
Take care. Bye-bye. Here we go. It's Richard Cashin, classmates with Mulroney at St. Yves. That's pretty interesting. Before we get to the news, let's go to line number 6. Ross, you're on the air.
Yeah, hi, Paddy.
Hi.
I just drove down Kmart Road there a little while ago, and the whiteout conditions were extremely bad to the point that, I mean, you couldn't see literally taillights in front of you, and a lot of cars didn't have taillights on because they're driving with just their daytime running lights on only. And so I end up turning on my emergency flashers just to give people around me a chance to see me, because it was crazy at the time, but they're clearing up in that area right now. So I just wanted to call in and let people know, if you're driving out around now, these flurries come up on you so quick. You should turn on your headlights for sure, and when it gets really bad, turn on your emergency flashers, because And the lady who called in a few minutes ago, multiple accidents on the Outer Ring Road, I chose not to take the Outer Ring Road before I heard that because I just thought it might be dangerous. I'm glad I came out road instead.
Well, it's going to be potentially dangerous everywhere if the whiteout conditions are as bad as described. And I'm looking out the window towards Kenmount Terrace right now. It has calmed down a little bit, but every now and then when the wind whips up, I can't even see across the street. So be extremely cautious. And I like your idea of putting on the flashers because there's no shame in it. It's certainly a better option than simply turning on your headlights and engaging your taillights.
Yeah, and I was pleased and surprised to see several people were driving with their flashers on as well, which is great because it gives you that little extra warning for people that's coming in front of you or behind you.
100%. Ross, I appreciate the time. Safe travel, sir.
Listen, one more thing that
Sure.
I mind. I've been meaning to call in about something. Clinch Crescent at the hospital is so busy at times with people trying to exit the hospital parking lot, especially when it's around 4:15 closing time. I pick my wife up there every day from work, and I go through the long waits to get off onto Principal Drive. When that new section opens, that traffic is just going to get so much worse with a lot more people there. Do you have any idea if there's any plans in making a double right turn lane coming out of Clinch Crescent, or if that would be a suggestion?
I've heard that being suggested in the past, and now that we're going to have a new mental health facility, an addictions facility, a new hostel, all in that already congested area, they're going to have to, I would think. They're going to have to reconfigure the roads there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's Principal Drive itself. There's sections there that can be extended. The left turn lane getting into Clinch Crescent should be extended on both sides of Clinch Crescent because a lot of times the people are waiting to turn left, and they end up going into the straight lane, blocking traffic, and people are shooting out around to try to get around the left turning traffic when there's plenty of room in the center median where they can make a left turn lane longer to accommodate the people waiting to turn left into Clinch Crescent on both sides of the hospital.
I can envision it with my mind's eye, and I think you're 100% right, Ross. I appreciate the heads up and the topic.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. All right, let's take a break for the news. When we come back, Wayne's here to talk about the conflict in the Middle East, where I think now the death toll of Palestinians has exceeded 30,000. And Connie's there to talk about Miles for Smiles. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 3. Wayne, you're on the air.
Good day, Paddy. How are you doing today?
Doing okay, thanks. How about you?
Oh, number one, Paddy boy. Trying to stay ahead of the wolf like everybody else, is it?
Yep.
Or the Grim Reaper, I'm not sure which. Anyway, Paddy, just a quick commentary before I get into my main subject here on the passing of Mr. Mulrooney. I, too, agree that he made a great contribution to our country here. Some of his ideas that were actually implemented, which is good, and we're all benefiting from. I think he was a good prime minister, probably one of our better ones. But there were a couple of little black marks on the wall, I guess. And I'm relying on my memory here. Was it not Brian Mulrooney that tried to dupe Clyde Wells into signing off on the Meech Lake Accord with changes he said were actually in the accord that Clyde had asked for, and he was told they were made but weren't in fact made to the accord?
There was plenty of gamesmanship surrounding Meech Lake, that's for sure. Now, the specifics of what clauses were required but were not in the agreement, but yet were told, I can't remember all of those details, but there was certainly lots of back and forth of concerns on that front.
Well, there was a big brouhaha at the time when Clyde was in Ottawa attending the meetings trying to put the accord together, and there were some things about it that Clyde objected to and had requested they be made, and was in fact told they were made, but upon inspection were not made, so Clyde refused to sign off on it. That's my memory anyway.
Okay.
Okay, now, Pat, are you still there?
I am, just listening.
Oh, that is good, yeah. Pat, let's go to the Middle East and the apparent genocide that's being applied over there by the Israelis against the Palestinian people. Now, I know a lot of people object to the word genocide, but I believe it is, in my own mind, that it is occurring because limited food, limited water, no sewage facilities, and your home's all destroyed pretty well. The whole damn country is pretty well destroyed with those Israeli bombs and whatever. And those people have nowhere to live. and they're crowded into whatever shelter they can get, which is pretty limited, I guess, from the images coming out of the country. And why this is allowed to go on in 2024, when Uncle Joe down there seems to be asleep at the switch or hasn't really swallowed enough grit in his gut to make the big decision about what needs to be done there. Every other country in the world is asking for ceasefire as a minimum and probably a stoppage in the whole effort. And the information that's coming from the Israeli government and the IDF, in my view, does not fit together very well as being truthful. So where does this go? I mean, they're looking for the leadership of Hamas. At the same time, there's various governments and probably the Israelis too negotiating with the same people that are not in the country anymore. They're in the Emirates or France or Egypt or somewhere else. So how are you going to eliminate them? And what is the whole point anymore? Given that the 30,000 Palestinians at least, I would say, have lost their lives, and I would also say nobody knows how many people are buried under the rubble. So this is a major world problem, and if it isn't fixed fairly soon, it may become even a bigger world problem. So something needs to be done. The only people that are interested in halting this effort are not in Israel nor the United States, it seems. So it's a big problem, and the responsibility for all of this mess, notwithstanding the October 7th goings on there, the attack on Israel, the major responsibility for this mess lays with the Israeli government, and they should be forced into giving up this military effort, allowing the people of Palestine to have some kind of a life going forward. And we all need to be involved in getting this pushed to the end. It's just incredible what is happening there. You have Putin in Ukraine and Netanyahu in Israel, the two same kind of personalities, and probably Donald Trump, unfortunately, emerging in the U.S. So there's a big problem and getting bigger, and sitting around with your hands in your pocket is not going to solve it. That's what I think.
Well, I don't know what Trump's stance would be on it. Seemingly would be not anti-Putin and not anti-Netanyahu either, given the fact that he took great aplomb with moving the American embassy into Jerusalem and the variety of things that I think, if people are being honest, we can point to regarding those types of relationships. But no matter how you slice it, it's a humanitarian crisis. 4 out of 5 people in Gaza and the West Bank are hungry. They're starving today. Canada's apparently going to do some sort of airdrop of supplies today in a humanitarian effort. That seems like, sending someone a Band-Aid after they just shot them. So anyway, there's a lot yet to be fully understood here. The international courts have spoken. The United Nations has spoken. Many countries on the face of the earth have also put forward their thoughts on a ceasefire, and it doesn't look like there's any end in sight. And don't take it from me, just take it from Netanyahu and his cabinet. Their goals are pretty clear. They want this to be the end of the conversation, not the beginning of a two-state solution. They want this to be the end.
Patty, I don't generally engage in these crazy ideas, I guess, of a theorist who developed some kind of crazy notions. But I'm coming to the conclusion that this got started by Hamas, I guess. But I'm just wondering if they were not sucked into starting this, because we knew from reporting that Israel, the state of Israel, and the military people in Israel were advised what was happening just outside the walls of the cities there, what Hamas was doing. They were preparing for something, and they all denied knowledge of it. But I'm beginning to wonder if what happened is what they actually wanted to happen to justify the total annihilation of the people of Palestine. Because, there were lots of opportunities to halt this, and a lot of effort put into doing just that. But it seems that the Israeli government always finds some reason not to make any concession there. So I'm wondering what the plan is. to eliminate the Palestinian people and take the rest of their land that they haven't already stolen over the last 30 or so years? That's what it looks like to me.
I don't know, but I mean, again, it's not my words, it's Mr. Netanyahu's himself, while campaigning, basically said our parties are your best defense against Hamas. So they've used Hamas as a political advantageous tool as much as a terrorist organization as the Israelis need to be wary of and fearful of. So there's a lot to it, and it's hard to understand what to believe and who to believe when we have these types of conflicts and the advent of social media, which has been just awful. Wayne, I've got to get to the break, but I appreciate your time.
Yes, I don't think you're going to get great reporting there, because every time there's a reporter lands in there to show the world what is actually happening, they seem to be taken out by the bullets from the Israeli military. Anyway, I'll let you go.
Thanks, Wayne. All the best.
Great weekend, buddy.
You too, pal. Bye-bye. All right, time for the final break of the morning and the week. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 4. Connie, you're on the air.
Oh, good morning, Patty. Just getting under the wire here, eh?
Yep.
Wanted to let you know the numbers in our court system in February, crimes against children. We had 355 cases listed, 67 different offenders. And, that's not encouraging, because the numbers have been averaging well over 300 per month since we started keeping track. And, of course, what needs to be remembered as well, always with the caveat that only 10% of cases ever get reported, roughly. So it's disturbing. And I wanted to highlight, because of feedback received, a case that happened about a week ago that was reported, I should say, a week ago through the media, a grandfather who abused his granddaughter. And people always have a very visceral reaction to this kind of assault when a close person in a child's life is involved like that, in that kind of abusive way. But I will mention to people that in most of the cases of child abuse, it's committed by a person, an adult person that the child trusts. So it's generally someone known to the child who commits these heinous acts. When you see a grandfather, abusing his granddaughter, of course, that really triggers a lot of reaction. So I just want to remind people all the time that, these things happen because of people known to the children and whom the children trust. I also want to mention again, too, about the impact of social media, because I don't think, to be honest, that we're going to see these numbers reduce anytime soon. We've got a real issue. We've got an epidemic, in my estimation. I attended an information session last week, and actually a researcher at Memorial was also in attendance, and he actually used that word, epidemic, which echoes a lot of the sentiments from community groups. And I think for years now, we've been slow walking towards this epidemic that involves violence against women and children. Again, the online predators, they're just waiting to take advantage of your children, and people may not realize, but it only takes about 8 minutes for an online predator to bond with a child. And that's kind of scary, or should be if you have children. We have numerous studies by renowned people in the field. I'll mention one of them. I did mention someone the last time, but I'll mention Dr. Jean Twang. She keeps telling us that Mark Zuckerberg is wrong. There is a causal link between social media and the numbers that we're seeing now in terms of teen depression, anxiety, loneliness, and suicide. and the numbers have really doubled in less than a 10-year period. So we have to take the issue seriously. It has to be prioritized, and to be perfectly frank, I don't think that has happened. It hasn't been given priority. There have been bills introduced in the federal legislature that take years to come to fruition, if indeed they do. And then, is it strong enough legislation? I'm not even sure about that. So I would encourage people to talk openly with their children about the ills and harms of social media, not only because it increases their knowledge, but it also heightens their willingness to reach out to you then if an issue does arise.
Yeah, and I bring it up quite often here off the top of the show because we know it's very real, and we hear the numbers of reports going to law enforcement agencies, and it's just staggering. And sometimes it doesn't simply end with embarrassment or stigma, it can end in tragedy, which has happened. And that's not hyperbolic, that's actually truth. Connie, I do have to get one more on. I'll give you another couple of seconds if you'd like to wrap up your thoughts.
Well, I just want to say, Patty, in terms of this epidemic, there are almost 500,000, almost 500,000 reports of sexual assaults every year. Out of every 1,000 cases, only 3 result in a conviction. And when you think about only 10% again being reported, the numbers are staggering. We are in an epidemic right now. And I really wish that the policymakers, the lawmakers, and the government would give this the greater priority that it desperately needs.
I appreciate the time, Connie. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. Final thoughts this morning go to line number 10 and the Executive Director at Kids Eat Smart. That's Selena Stoyle. Selena, you're on the air.
Hi, good morning, Patty.
Good morning. Before we get into all the good work that you're doing, we only have a couple of minutes to get out of the show here, so you've got some announcements to make.
We do. So I'm calling to share with all your listeners that tomorrow night, March the 2nd, is our Kids Eat Smart night at the Mary Brown Centre in partnership with the Newfoundland Growlers hockey game. So this is an event that we've planned to help raise awareness and, of course, the financial support to the Kids Eat Smart breakfast clubs in Newfoundland Labrador, because every day we're serving over 40,000 breakfasts. So this is a great opportunity for people to come out, support the breakfast clubs, bring your family, bring your friends, and there's still time to purchase tickets. So people can go to kidseatsmart.ca, click on the Growlers button, and book your tickets. And we're asking everybody who's coming, bring a loonie and a toonie, because we're collecting those for the breakfast clubs. But this morning, I'm excited to share with you that we have a WestJet giveaway. So anyone who purchased tickets up to today was put in a draw, and it is 2 tickets anywhere WestJet flies, and that's Wanda Lambert. She's our winner. But I also want to share that tomorrow night, for anyone who's coming, there's still tickets available. Some lucky winner is going to win 2 tickets anywhere Air Canada flies. So, we just want to say thank you to everyone who supports the children in Newfoundland and Labrador and their breakfast clubs, and to all of our sponsors for this event. So we're telling people, come out, come to the Mary Brown Centre, enjoy the hockey game, come see our team, come see the sponsors, and as well, come have fun, but knowing that you're supporting the children and the breakfast clubs in Newfoundland and Labrador.
Tickets to the game are $20, $5 of each of those tickets goes to Kids Eat Smart. Enjoy the game, and it's great for the Growlers to be partnering with so many community groups. I think it's been really helpful for the team and, of course, for the community groups and the rest of us. Selena, thanks for doing this morning.
Thank you so much, Patty.
You're welcome. Take care.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye. Selena Stoyles from Kids Eat Smart. All right, good show today. Big thanks to everyone who supports the program, and we will indeed pick up this conversation again on Monday morning right here on VOCM and Big Land FM's Open Line. On behalf of the producer, David Williams, I'm your host, Paddy Daly. Have yourself a safe, fun, happy weekend. Talk Monday. Bye-bye.